Chapter 681. The Soaring Dragon Cultivation Method was indeed exquisite. Only 30% of his Jinqi was able to suppress Zhang Xiaohu's internal energy. When Zhang Xiaohu saw that Zhang Xiaohua was not afraid at all and was able to easily block his internal energy, his heart was filled with joy. Last night, Zhang Xiaohu used his internal energy to refine the effects of the Meridian Nourishing Pill. Although he used an entire night of hard work, his foundation was still poor. He had only cultivated for 4 years, so by the time the sun rose, there was still a small portion of the medicinal effects that had not been refined. Furthermore, just the Crimson Flame Pill alone was able to increase one's internal energy by 5 years. If it was refined using the Immortal Tao method, it would be able to increase one's internal energy by 15 years. Zhang Xiaohua's internal energy had suddenly increased by 10 years for no reason. How could she freely control it? He took the opportunity to exchange pointers with Zhang Xiaohua. On one hand, he wanted to exercise his hands and feet. On the other hand, he wanted to use this opportunity to familiarize himself with the 10 years of internal energy that he had just obtained. Zhang Xiaohu originally wanted to slowly refine the remaining medicinal effects in his dantian in the future. However, now that he saw that Zhang Xiaohua was able to easily block his internal energy, a thought arose in his mind. Wasn't this a great opportunity to refine the remaining medicinal effects? Therefore, he immediately silently used the divine ethereal art and urged the medicinal effects in his dantian to rush into his meridians. Zhang Xiaohua saw that her second brother's internal energy had reached its peak and suddenly had new internal energy. She originally wanted to dissuade him, but she immediately understood. She smiled and said, "Second brother, so you still have some medicinal effects that you haven't refined. Then I'll give you a hand." After she finished speaking, she increased the amount of Jinqi in her hand. Seeing that Zhang Xiaohua was still able to speak in such a battle of internal energy, Zhang Xiaohu's heart felt more at ease. He urged the medicinal effects and directly rushed to his arm. Changgu and Chun Chen's expressions changed slightly when they saw the two of them directly fighting with their internal energy. Especially Changgu. When she saw Zhang Xiaohu's internal energy surge, she was afraid that he would accidentally injure Zhang Xiaohua. Now that she saw Zhang Xiaohua speak so easily, she let out a sigh of relief. She immediately thought about how she had descended from the sky yesterday and subdued the entire Blood Wolf pack. How could she be injured by Zhang Xiaohu's hands? After the time it took to drink a cup of tea, Zhang Xiaohua felt that the internal energy coming from her second brother's hand. She immediately said, "Second brother, the medicinal effects should be completely refined. You should slowly withdraw your energy." When Zhang Xiaohu heard this, he did not dare to delay and slowly withdrew his internal energy. Fortunately, this was a battle between brothers. Zhang Xiaohu also knew that his younger brother would definitely not take the opportunity to attack. Otherwise, when he withdrew his internal energy, his opponent would take the opportunity to attack him. Even if he did not die, he would be seriously injured. When Zhang Xiaohu withdrew a portion of his internal energy, Zhang Xiaohua also withdrew a portion. After a while, both of their hands had no internal energy left. Zhang Xiaohu did not care about anything else. He immediately sat cross-legged with his palms, facing the sky, and quietly adjusted his internal energy. When Zhang Xiaohua saw this, she nodded slightly to Changgu and Chun Chun, who were standing beside her. She stood beside Zhang Xiaohu and released her divine sense to protect him. Although Zhang Xiaohua did not practice internal energy, she knew the dangers involved. Back then, words such as qi deviation were always on the tip of her tongue. Now that she saw her second brother immediately adjusting his internal energy without asking anything, she knew the reason. Changji's body had not yet recovered, so the responsibility of protecting him must be taken up by him. At this time, within Zhang Xiaohu's meridians, due to the impact of Zhang Xiaohua's powerful internal energy and his own deliberate indulgence, the last part of the medicinal effect of the Meridian Nourishing Pill had been forcibly refined. The surging internal energy madly produced in Zhang Xiaohu's lower dantian, and then rushed into the meridians in his body. Zhang Xiaohu was now like a weak child, trying to use his slender arms to control a small boat. He felt very powerless. Fortunately, his meridians had been transformed by the meridian nourishing pill last night. They were tougher and wider than most people's meridians. Under the impact of the huge internal energy, there was not the slightest damage. Under the galloping internal energy, there were even signs of the meridians faintly expanding. Zhang Xiaohu did not dare to be careless. He calmly guarded his heart and tried to control the somewhat crazy internal energy. It went along the meridians in his body, one cycle after another. Changgu, who stood to the side and did not speak, was more nervous than Zhang Xiaohu at this time. The internal energy in Zhang Xiaohu's meridians was frantic. From the outside, his face was constantly changing between green and red. The white qi that had been condensed into a line above his head was sometimes scattered and sometimes gathered. It was a sign of qi deviation. However, even though Chang Ji's fingernails were clenched into the flesh, she could not help Zhang Xiaohu in the slightest. At this moment, Changgu almost wanted to suffer for Zhang Xiaohu. Changgu felt that Zhang Xiaohu was in danger. Zhang Xiaohua, who had already released her divine sense, was one step ahead of him. She saw Zhang Xiaohua stretch out her finger, which was only a few inches away from Zhang Xiaohu's back. As long as she saw the slightest trace of inheritance, she would immediately point it out. However, Zhang Xiaohua herself was also clear that the internal energy cultivation should be the same as the true qi. Only when she could control it, it could be her own cultivation. If she had the help of others, her future achievements would inevitably be limited. Therefore, unless it was a last resort, the true qi on Zhang Xiaohua's finger could not be transferred. In another half a cup of tea's time, she did not know how many cycles the internal energy had run in Zhang Xiaohu's body. She only saw that Zhang Xiaohu's face was becoming more and more normal, and the white line condensed by the internal energy above his head was gradually condensed. It became more and more shaped, pointing straight to the sky. At this time, Zhang Xiaohua's finger quietly withdrew. In fact, she did not point this finger at the beginning. Zhang Xiaohua already knew in her heart that the most difficult moment had passed. In the future, Zhang Xiaohu could only be more skillful, and there was no need for her to intervene. Sure enough, in another half a cup of tea's time, the white line above Zhang Xiaohu's head gradually disappeared. Following that, Zhang Xiaohu opened his eyes, and his eyes were filled with surprise. When he woke up in the morning, he only roughly checked his internal energy. He only knew that it had increased by a lot, but as for how much, he did not have a direct idea. He immediately compared it with Zhang Xiaohua. At this time, he had refined the remaining medicinal power of the soothing pulse pill and combined it with the internal energy that had increased last night. At this time, he felt that the internal energy in his meridians was like a turbulent river, continuous and unending. It was a realm that he had never dreamed of before. When he raised his head and was about to ask Zhang Xiaohua, he saw a pair of watery eyes looking at him with concern. Immediately, his face revealed a gentle expression, and he said with a smile, "Are you okay?" Chang's face was slightly red, as if she was thinking of yesterday's charm and gentleness. She slightly lowered her head and said in a soft voice, "I'm okay. How about the injuries on your body? Does it still hurt?" It didn't hurt a long time ago. The places where I was bitten by the blood wolf and the places where my bones were broken are all warm and itchy. I think it's because of the magic of Xiaohua's pill yesterday. Immediately, she said to Zhang Xiaohua, "Xiaohua, thank you." Second, Sister Chang'e, we're all family. Please don't mention the word, thank you. This family did not know whether it was the Zhang family or the Misty School. In short, Chang'e was embarrassed to think too much. She looked at Zhang Xiaohu again and probed, "Xiaohua, just now when you were practicing martial arts with Xiaohua, it seems that your internal energy has improved a lot. And when you were practicing your internal energy, you actually condensed it into a line. This This is the appearance of internal energy practicing to the perfection stage. Zhang Xiaohu talked about what happened yesterday and just now. He also said in a puzzled tone, I feel that I have a lot of internal energy in my body, but I don't know to what extent I've practiced it. Chang'e laughed out loud. Zhang Xiaohu was telling the truth. He had only practiced internal energy for a few years. In addition to the changes in the Misty School, he didn't have a better practice environment. He didn't know a lot of basic knowledge. Of course, he didn't know to what extent he had practiced his internal energy. In fact, even Zhang Xiaohua didn't know this question. If he answered, it would only be a number from Rejuvenation Valley. Come here and let me see. Chang'e nodded. Zhang Xiaohu obediently walked in front of Chang'e and stretched out his hand. Chang'e stretched out her hand and a stream of internal energy entered Zhang Xiaohu's meridians. As the internal energy went deeper, Chang'e's face was first filled with surprise, but it slowly turned into confusion. She frowned slightly. Seeing Chang'e like this, Zhang Xiaohu was also nervous. When Chang'e finally withdrew her hand, he immediately asked, What's wrong? Is there something wrong? Zhang Xiaohua, who was beside him, was also watching anxiously. He didn't want to ruin his second brother's cultivation with his good intentions. Chang'e pondered for a moment and said hesitantly, There's nothing wrong. It just feels a little strange. Chen also said, Senior sister, is it that the appearance of senior brother condensing his qi into a line is different from his actual cultivation? Yes, it's like that. Chang'e nodded and said, When the internal energy is condensed into a line, it should be more than 30 years of internal energy cultivation. How many years have you been cultivating? How can you have such an achievement? However, the internal energy in your meridians is abundant. Although it's not 30 years, it should still be more than 20 years of internal energy cultivation. Zhang Xiaohu was dumbfounded and said with his mouth wide open, Chang'e, are you sure you didn't see wrong? I actually have more than 20 years of cultivation? Chang'e still nodded. I've been cultivating internal energy for more than 10 years. Although I don't know what 30 years of internal energy cultivation is like, I've heard about it from Master. Previously, you worked hard to cultivate and made rapid progress. 4 years of hard work is equivalent to 7 years of other people's internal energy cultivation. However, after I didn't see you for a night, I woke up and found that your cultivation is something I can't even catch up to. As she spoke, a smile appeared at the corner of her mouth. Zhang Xiaohu knew that his cultivation had improved greatly, but he didn't expect it to be such a huge improvement. This good news made him feel a little dizzy. He could only open his mouth and smile foolishly. Zhang Xiaohua next to him asked, Sister Chang'e, my second brother's internal energy has improved by leaps and bounds. Is there anything wrong with it? Chapter 682. Of course. Chang'e pursed her lips and smiled. Actually, as Chen said just now, your second brother's internal strength should be more than 30 years, but his real internal strength is only 20 years. This is what I was puzzled about. Of course, this situation also shows that as long as Xiaohu works hard, the difference of 10 years can be achieved very quickly. In other words, my second brother doesn't need to spend another 10 years of hard work to achieve the internal strength that other people need 10 years to achieve. That should be the case. Chang'e nodded. Zhang Xiaohua pondered for a moment and asked, Then what if my second brother gains another 30 years of internal strength? What? This? How is this possible? The three of them were very surprised and cried out at the same time. Chang'e opened her eyes wide and said, Xiaohua, the thing you gave Xiaohu, is it the legendary magical pill that increases internal strength? Do you have the same kind of pill? Then, without waiting for Zhang Xiaohua to nod, she explained, Maybe you don't know, this kind of pill that increases internal strength, although it's good, seems to be very harmful to the meridians. Think about it. It's a narrow road for a person to walk on. If you suddenly let 3 rows of carriages walk side by side, there will definitely be a big problem. I think that the signs of Xiaohu's qi deviation just now are because his meridians can't adapt to the huge amount of internal strength. then doesn't that mean that no one dares to take the pill that increases internal strength? Zhang Xiaohua knew that Changa's guess was wrong, but she still asked curiously. This situation is because your second brother has just started cultivating inner force. If he has been cultivating for a long time, like our Misty sect leader, which one of them hasn't been immersed in inner force for dozens of years? Their meridians have been tempered to be incomparably tough. This sudden increase in inner force makes it easier to control. Oh, so it's like that. Zhang Xiaohua somewhat understood. Of course, his heart was more at ease. What was the meridian nourishing pill for? It was to nourish and refine the meridians. After Zhang Xiaohu took the meridian nourishing pill, the meridians in his body were definitely comparable to masters who practiced for dozens of years. Then, Changa said, there's another problem. Each kind of pill is only effective for the first time. If you continue to take it, the effect will be greatly reduced. I think if you give Xiaohu the same pill, it won't increase his internal strength for more than 10 years. At most, it's 3 to 5 years. Zhang Xiaohua was still unwilling to give up and asked, then, what if it's a different type of pill? This? Changa looked at Zhang Xiaohua as if he was looking at a monster. In Jianghu, he had only heard of the elixir that could increase one's power, but he had never seen it. Even in the ethereal sect, he had only picked up some spirit herbs from the secret land and refined some elixirs that could increase his power. However, this was not something that Chang could know. Moreover, as long as one could get this kind of elixir, he didn't know how much merit he had accumulated in his previous life. When Changa saw that Zhang Xiaohu's internal strength suddenly increased by dozens of years, of course, he thought that Zhang Xiaohua only had one elixir. Then, Zhang Xiaohua asked again, and Changa naturally thought that maybe there were two. This possibility was the limit of Changa's imagination. At this time, when he heard that there was another kind of elixir that could increase internal strength, Changa almost thought that he was dreaming, or Zhang Xiaohua was joking. Although Chun Chen's kung fu was not as good as Changa's, and her knowledge was not as good as Changa's, she had heard about this kind of magical elixir. At this time, she couldn't help but curl her lips and say, Zhang Xiaohua, you really know how to brag. Zhang Xiaohua laughed. When he was about to speak, his heart suddenly thumped. He thought of the joke Zhang Xiaohua made yesterday, sword light. Sword light was not something that could be done with more than 20 years of internal strength. Since Zhang Xiaohua said, so yesterday, could it be? Zhang Xiaohua looked at his second brother, his future second sister-in-law, and then at the petite Chin-Chun who had a look of disbelief on her face. Zhang Xiaohua smiled. If they cannot be trusted, then who else in this world could be trusted? So, Zhang Xiaohua nodded with a smile. Seeing Zhang Xiaohua's affirmative action, Changa almost felt that all his cognition was about to change. Everything could happen to this child in his impression. Well, she somewhat forgot that yesterday, before she fainted, she saw the immortal falling from the sky. Do you really have other elixirs that can increase internal strength? Even Chun-Chun felt that his mouth and tongue were dry, and he still didn't believe it. Zhang Xiaohua raised his chin and somewhat disdained to answer. Chun-Chun stamped his foot and used his shoulder to support Changa. Changa didn't care about their business. She just thought for a while and said, even if I have other elixirs, it's not suitable for Xiaohu to take them at this time. Seeing Zhang Xiaohua and his brother's puzzlement, Chun-Chun next to them said, on the first day of practicing internal strength, didn't Master say that the most important thing to practice internal strength is to take one step at a time? Don't bite off more than you can chew. Senior brother has got more than 20 years of internal strength, but he hasn't mastered it well. Just now he almost went mad. If he suddenly increases his internal strength, won't it be more difficult to control it? Let's wait until senior brother carefully understands the internal strength that he got for free and can use it freely. After that, she rolled her eyes at Zhang Xiaohua and said, you don't even know this? What did your master teach you? Zhang Xiaohua secretly sighed and said, it's so good to have a master. If it weren't for Changa and Chun-Chun, I would have done something bad with good intentions. Then she cupped her hands and said, thank you for your explanation, Master Chun. If you didn't tell me, I wouldn't have known. Thank you for your advice. Bah! Chen Chen spat, and her expression was very similar to Nye Qinyu's. But soon her expression changed, and was completely different from Nye Qinyu's. She said shyly, "Senior brother can't take it today. Don't you want to give me one of the elixirs for the sake of my explanation?" Then she stretched out her chubby little hand. "Oh, okay." Hearing this, Zhang Xiaohua didn't hesitate at all. She took out a jade bottle and poured 2 elixirs into Chun Chen's hand. Chun Chen was stunned and said, "Huh? You're really giving it to me?" Then she smelled it and then laughed. "Zhang Xiaohua, what kind of elixir is this? It doesn't smell like medicine at all. Are you trying to fool a little boy?" "Hee hee, I know this elixir is precious, but I'm just teasing you. If you don't want to give it to me, I won't give it to you. Why do you give me a fake elixir? You even gave me 2 of them. It shows that you're generous." Zhang Xiaohua touched her nose and said, "One is for you, and the other is for Sister Chang'e." "Hee hee, you even want to fool Senior's sister." Chen Chen still didn't believe it. "Chen Chen," Zhang Xiaohu next to her scolded, "don't make trouble with Xiaohua. Last night, Xiaohua gave me this elixir." Chen Chen had always been Chang'e's little tail, and now she was naturally taken care of by Zhang Xiaohu. She didn't dare to disobey Zhang Xiaohu's words and didn't dare to not believe them. Hearing Zhang Xiaohu's words, she couldn't help trembling in her hands, and the 2 made nourishing elixirs almost fell to the ground. She stammered, "Zhang Xiaohua, you really want to give this elixir to me and to Senior Sister?" Zhang Xiaohua saw that Chun Chen was defeated, and she was secretly happy. She nodded and said, "A gentleman keeps his word. If I say it's for you, it's for you." Chang'e next to her said, "No, it's so precious." Before she finished her words, Chun Chen pulled her arm and said reluctantly, "Senior Sister, this is 20 years' worth of power." Ahem. Zhang Xiaohu also coughed a few times, stared at Chang'e, and said, "Xiaohua gave it to you. Just take it. Don't talk nonsense." Hearing this, Chang'e was a little angry, but her face was flushed. She didn't know that everything yesterday was clearly seen by Zhang Xiaohua in the air. She had been putting on airs and thinking that she was Zhang Xiaohu's senior sister. At this time, when she was scolded by Zhang Xiaohu, everything was exposed. How could she not be angry out of shame? Alas, it was just that she didn't realize it herself. When she talked about Zhang Xiaohu just now, she called him Xiaohu, Xiao, and didn't hear her call him Junior Brother Zhang. Then Chang'e was a little shy and said, "Since it's Xiaohua's good intention, I won't be polite. In fact, I also want it very much." Seeing that Chang'e was not different from the old Chang'e, Zhang Xiaohua was very happy. She looked at her second brother, who was smiling foolishly next to her, and really despised him. Then, "Xiaohua, do you still have?" Chang'e asked very hesitantly, but she couldn't even finish her sentence. Zhang Xiaohua immediately understood and said with a smile, "Sister Chang'e, do you think I have many of these pills? And even if I do, can I let others know except for you?" Chang'e nodded and didn't ask any more questions. "That's right, Senior Sister. My martial arts in the sect aren't high to begin with. Only after I take this pill can I show them my prowess. If they all take it, and their martial arts are higher than mine, what fun would there be?" Zhang Xiaohu also nodded and took a step forward. "We must be careful about this matter. We must not let others know about it, especially the people from the fragrant cult. I heard that the destruction of our Misty sect seemed to be related to this matter. We must not repeat the same mistake." "I know, Senior Brother," Chen Chen said softly. "I'm not that stupid." Chang'e naturally nodded. Then Zhang Xiaohu asked, "Xiaohua, when is it suitable for Chang'e and Chun Chen to take these pills? Will Chang'e's injury affect them?" Zhang Xiaohua thought for a moment and asked, "Sister Chang'e, the bones in your arm are broken and now I'm fixing them. Don't you know that it will affect your internal strength?" Chang'e smiled and said, "When I woke up just now, I already tried it. It didn't affect me much." "Well, that's good." Zhang Xiaohua said, "It's best to take it after the bones are healed, but it's okay to take it now." When Zhang Xiaohu heard this, he immediately urged, "Then what are you hesitating for? If Chang'e's arm is healed after 100 days, won't it take a few months? Not to mention that Xiaohua may not be cheap. Even the environment of our Misty Hall is not suitable to take this kind of pill. Everything should be done in the Yulon Grand Canyon. Zhang Xiaohu, on the other hand, was more anxious than Chang'e. Chapter 683. Zhang Xiaohua didn't understand the meaning of Zhang Xiaohu's words. She only thought that the situation of Shixin Peak was the same as what she had heard from Bai Huan, which was under the supervision of the fragrance cult. It was definitely inappropriate to help Chang'e and Chunshin improve their skills. So she nodded and said, "Second brother is right. I am now a little pharmacist in the Tuatan Hall, and I stay in Timu Peak. It is unrealistic to go to your Shixin Peak. Sister Chang'e's meridians are smooth, and her arms are not affected too much." Tuatan Hall? Little pharmacist, Timu Peak? The three people were even more surprised and exclaimed. They had been in the fragrance cult for a long time and were clear about the affairs of the fragrance cult. When they were about to ask in detail, Zhang Xiaohua waved her hand and said, "Let's not talk about the specific story. It's too long. You just need to know." Then she looked at the sky and said, "Anyway, it will take a long time to refine orchid dusk. We might as well stay here for one more day and take the elixir." Chang'e didn't answer and looked up at Zhang Xiao. 20 years of skills was like a pie falling from the sky. If Chang'e wasn't tempted, it was definitely not true. However, since yesterday, the window paper between Chang'e and Zhang Xiaohu was broken. Chang'e was no longer just Zhang Xiaohu's senior sister. Chang'e still had to listen to Zhang Xiaohu's opinion on some things. It had to be said that Chang'e was really a nice person. Before Zhang Xiaohu said anything, Qinshin was happy. She pulled out her hand holding Chang'e and snapped her fingers, shouting, "Zhang Xiaohua, you are great." Zhang Xiaohu wouldn't stop her. He looked at Chang'e and said, "Xiaohua is right. We still have time, so we might as well do it here." Then she turned her head and asked, "Xiaohua, shall we take it now?" "Well, there's no time to lose. Let's go to the cave and let Sister Chang'e take it first, then let Qinshan take it." Hearing Zhang Xiaohua call her Qinshan again, Qinshan was a little unhappy. "Zhang Xiaohua, I'm your senior sister. Why do you call Chang'e senior sister and call me by my name?" This. Looking at Qinshan, who was a full head shorter than him, Zhang Xiaohua really did not know whether she was older or younger than him. Back then, at the Ethereal Villa martial arts exhibition, he had only seen Qinshan once. At that time, Qinshan was not much taller than him. Moreover, she also had a round face with baby fat, so it was impossible to tell her age. How could he call her senior sister? Thus, Zhang Xiaohua smiled and said, "Shouldn't a girl's age be kept a secret?" Qinshan was stunned and didn't know what Zhang Xiaohua meant. He nodded and said, "Yes. What's wrong?" "So, I don't know your age, and you can't tell me. Since you're younger than me, you can't escape from being called junior sister. However, between junior sister and Qinshan, which name will you choose?" Qinshan was anxious and cried, "How can you call me junior sister?" Zhang Xiaohua shrugged and said with a smile, "So I call you Qinshan? What's wrong with that?" This. Qinshan was a little confused and didn't understand what was wrong. Chang'e stood beside Qinshan with a smile on the corner of her mouth. Since she came to the fragrance cult, it was very difficult for Chang'e to have such a smile on her face. However, she had laughed more in the past 2 days than in the previous years. At this moment, there was a wolf howl at the foot of the mountain. Everyone looked in the direction of the howl and saw that it was the new Blood Wolf King leading dozens of blood wolves. Soon, the wolf pack came to the foot of the mountain. The Blood Wolf King went straight up the mountain, and the other blood wolves quickly walked to the side of the previous blood wolves. The blood wolves from last night all howled and ran in the direction of the Blood Wolf King. When the Blood Wolf King came up to the hill, Zhang Xiaohua couldn't help but frown. She hadn't seen the Blood Wolf King for a night, and there seemed to be some changes. Zhang Xiaohua couldn't see many subtle changes, but the original brown fur had gradually turned yellow, and there was a golden luster, which Zhang Xiaohua could see clearly. Maybe the new Blood Wolf King drank the blood of the previous Blood Wolf King yesterday, so the new Blood Wolf King changed like this. Zhang Xiaohua understood. Blood Wolf. Maybe this is the meaning of the word blood? The Blood Wolf King came to Zhang Xiaohua's side and circled around Zhang Xiaohua, then walked to Qinshan. Qinshan knew that the Blood Wolf King wouldn't hurt her, but after all, she was still afraid. Although Chang'e heard about it from Chun Shun in the morning, now that she saw it, she couldn't help trembling with fear. Zhang Xiaohua saw this, and quickly caught up with the Blood Wolf King. She took the black puppy from Chun Shun and said, "You help Sister Chang'e back to the cave first. You two stay a little further away. Don't be in a hurry to take the blood. Regulate your internal force and wait for me to go in and take it. I'll help you to dissolve the medicine." Chang'e and Chang'e couldn't wait to leave, so they just casually agreed and walked away. The black puppy, which was not much bigger than Little Martin, was held by Zhang Xiaohua with one hand. It was still like Little Martin, with its eyes tightly closed. The Blood Wolf King came closer, but stopped when it was about 3 steps away. It respectfully squatted on the ground and quietly watched. Zhang Xiaohua touched the black puppy's smooth and shiny fur and said with a smile, "Brother Wolf, don't be so polite. Little Martin is still asleep and can't see you." The Blood Wolf King didn't quite understand, so it only growled a few times and still sat upright. Zhang Xiaohua thought for a moment and said, "Although you can't speak, I guess you're here to guard Little Martin. Then you should carefully squat here. I have something to do in the cave. If you don't come in, don't come in." After that, she said to Zhang Xiao, "Let's go, second brother. Let's also enter the cave. With the Blood Wolf King guarding the entrance for us, which beast in the Yulon Grand Canyon would dare to disturb us?" The two laughed and entered the cave. The Blood Wolf King was still squatting there, quietly and without making a sound. Inside the cave, Chang'e and Chun Shun sat on opposite sides with their eyes closed. Zhang Xiaohua looked at the black puppy and handed it to Zhang Xiao. "You hold it, second brother. This is our protective talisman in the Yulon Grand Canyon." Zhang Xiaohu was startled. He carefully took it from Zhang Xiaohua's hands and said, "Xiaohua, what do you mean? How come I don't understand? This puppy looks like it hasn't reached full term. Maybe it will die in a while. How can it be our protective talisman?" After thinking for a moment, Zhang Xiaohua said, "Forget it, it's nothing. Second brother, you just hold it." Zhang Xiao nodded. This black puppy was so pitiful. What was the big deal about carefully holding it? While they were talking, Chun Shun and Chang'e opened their eyes at the same time and said, "Xiaohua, you've done 3 cycles of internal energy. Is it okay?" "Yes, it's okay." "Sister Chang'e, are your meridians blocked?" Chang'e smiled and said, "Before I fell into a coma yesterday, the internal energy in my meridians was exhausted and I was seriously injured. However, there was no blockage. After taking your elixir, I checked it just now and it's much better." "Very good." Zhang Xiaohua nodded and said to Chun Shun, "I'll help Sister Chang'e dissolve the medicine first." "Wait a moment." "Okay." Chun Shun got up and handed a soothing pulse pill to Chang'e. Chang'e took it with her uninjured hand and looked at Zhang Xiaohua. "Then I'm convinced." Zhang Xiaohua smiled and nodded slightly. Chang'e looked at Zhang Xiaohu again and put the soothing pulse pill into her mouth. Just like Zhang Xiaohu, the refreshing fragrance of the medicine immediately spread out from her mouth, and a warm current rushed into her meridians. Chang'e didn't dare to delay and immediately used her internal energy to guide the warm current along her meridians into her lower dantian. Zhang Xiaohua also transferred her internal energy into Chang'e's meridians at the beginning. Although Chang'e's meridians hadn't been nourished and transformed by starlight, her internal energy had been tempered by the Misty School for more than 10 years. Zhang Xiaohua wrapped the soothing pulse pill with her internal energy and slowly released its efficacy. Chang'e's meridians were also repaired and tempered inch by inch under the effect of the soothing pulse pill. After an unknown period of time, Chang'e had run her internal breath 3 times. At this time, the efficacy of the meridian moistening pill had refined her tendons and meridians 3 times. The width and toughness of her tendons and meridians had changed dramatically. However, Chang'e's tendons and meridians were weaker than Zhang Xiao's. Therefore, the meridian moistening pill's transformation of her tendons and meridians was still inferior to Zhang Xiao's. Even the remaining efficacy was much more than Zhang Xiao's. Zhang Xiaohua sighed in his heart. He retracted his zhenqi and whispered, "Elder Sister Chang'e, I've already helped you absorb a portion of the pill's medicinal strength. The rest will depend on you. However, don't be like my second brother and absorb it all at once. It's best if you absorb it bit by bit. Changa's internal energy cultivation compared to Zhang Xiaohu's was like the difference between heaven and earth. How could she not understand this principle? Without waiting for Zhang Xiaohua to finish speaking, Zhang Xiaohu immediately activated his Heart Sutra and began to refine it bit by bit. Even Zhang Xiaohu's control and precision of Zhang Changa's internal energy was something that Zhang Xiaohu could not match. Seeing that Changa had begun to refine the remaining efficacy of the pill, Zhang Xiaohua walked to Chun Chen's side and helped him transform his meridians. Needless to say, Chun Chen's meridians were much worse than Changa's. His meridians were narrow and fragile. Zhang Xiaohua had to be more careful in controlling the release of the efficacy of the pill. She was afraid that Chun Chen's meridians would swell and burst. After 3 cycles of transformation, the remaining efficacy of the nourishing meridians pill in Chun Chen's lower dantian was more than Changa's. Zhang Xiaohua smiled bitterly. It seemed that this pill that increased power had different effects on different people. Just this nourishing meridians pill alone had so much efficacy that it could not be used up. Then what about the qi-generating pill? Zhang Xiaohua had temporarily given up the idea of letting them take the qi-generating pill. For Chun Chen, Zhang Xiaohua did not dare to withdraw her internal energy immediately. Instead, she waited for Chun Chen to refine a little bit of the efficacy of the pill. After she knew that there would be no problems, she withdrew it. She said to Zhang Xiaohu, who had been watching from the side, "Well, second brother, I've done what I can do. What's left is to refine the efficacy of the pill. I think second brother also knows this. As for how many years of power it can increase, that depends on each person's fate." Then he took the little black dog from Zhang Xiaohu's hands and said in a low voice, "Second brother, you should also quickly adjust your breathing. If you can properly control the power of these 20 years before we leave the valley, we can do it for a few more decades." Zhang Xiaohu was stunned. He had always heard that inner strength was cultivated by oneself. Why did Zhang Xiaohua say that it was obtained? Chapter 684. In the blue sky, the sun hung high in the sky. The huge halo around it shot out 7 colors. The whole sun was several times bigger than usual. On the great serene orchid prairie, a cool breeze still blew, causing the knee-high grass to sway left and right. Elk, antelope, grass rabbits, and the like were all leisurely nibbling on the grass and drinking water. When they were happy, they would even jump and run around as if they were in a good mood. Everything was peaceful. Suddenly, on the east side of the prairie near a mountain, the small animals stopped and straightened their ears. Then they all ran as far as they could, sometimes looking back as if something terrible had happened. Not long after, a group of tall blood wolves came from the distance. But strangely, they ignored the small animals and walked slowly, unhurriedly. This grassland was originally the territory of elk and other animals. Blood wolves were rare here, and it was really thought-provoking that they swaggered so openly. What was even more strange was that in the middle of the group of blood wolves, there were 4 carriages pulled by elk. Of the 4 carriages, only the first one had a tall and thin young man sitting lazily in the driver's seat. But he also closed his eyes and sat cross-legged. He didn't hold a whip. As long as the elk pulling the carriage deviated slightly or slacked off, a blood wolf would immediately run out from the wolf pack. With a sweep of its broom-sized tail, the elk would immediately change direction and obediently walk forward. The young man driving the carriage didn't need to do anything. The 3 carriages followed closely behind. The curtains were blown open, and there were some boxes inside. There was no one inside. At this time, not far from the cliff, a large group of jackdaws seemed to be alarmed by the advancing blood wolves. They cawed and sat cross-legged in the air in front of the carriage. They didn't fly away, as if attracted by something. From the side of the first carriage, a blood wolf with light golden fur quickly rushed out. The young man in the carriage let out a low growl and quickly rushed forward. At this time, a clear female voice came from the carriage. "Zhang Xiaohua, why are there jackdaws in front?" Along the way, Although we saw many dried bloodstains, there were no corpses left. Jackdaws that specialize in pecking a carrion have never existed before. The young man opened his eyes and said, "Chun Chun, this is the first time I've seen this jackdaw. How can I answer you? Won't we know when the Blood Wolf King returns? What can the Blood Wolf King say to you? Why don't we go up and take a look? If it's not Elk's corpse, then it's a disciple of the Aroma sect. It's better to have a complete corpse so that we can reincarnate well." A calm female voice said, "Xiaohua, don't keep telling Xiaohua what to do. Now that you've refined the medicinal power of the pills, your internal energy cultivation is much higher than ours. It's time for you to go and take a look. Let second brother rest. He'll pass by in a while. We'll just bury him." The four of them were Zhang Xiaohua and her companions. That day, Zhang Xiaohua helped Chang'e and Qin Chun take the meridian nourishing pill to transform the meridians in their bodies. He left them another day and night to refine the remaining medicinal power. However, that was nearly 20 years of internal strength after all. It was not something that could be completed in a short period of time. The next day, Chang'e suggested that they go back. Although there was no danger in the Yulon Canyon, it was not a safe place. Therefore, no one had any objections. In the beginning, the four of them were like before, riding on ferocious beasts. However, when they passed by the forest where Zhang Xiaohu and the rest had first encountered the blood wolf, Chang'e's heart skipped a beat. There were more than 50 people from the Misty Hall, and they had already picked a lot of spiritual herbs. These were things that the hall urgently needed. If they were to be left here, then the dozens of lives that were left here would be worthless. Therefore, she wanted to bring back the dozens of carriages in the forest. This idea was beautiful, but how could it be justified? Even if the four of them had the elk, how could they bring back dozens of carriages? The disciples of the fragrance cult would not think that the beasts in the Yulon Canyon had changed to eating grass. In fact, even if the four of them each drove a carriage, it would be surprising. Zhang Xiaohua had raised an objection at that time. However, Zhang Xiao knew that the Misty Hall was short of these spiritual herbs. Moreover, there were the painstaking efforts of the dead disciples. If it did not bring them back, it would be really painful. Therefore, the three of them weighed the pros and cons. Well, except for Zhang Xiaohua, they collected the most precious spiritual herbs in the four carriages and let the blood wolf capture four elk to pull the carriages. Thus, there were now 4 large carriages. Of the dozens of spiritual herbs in the carriages, only 4 could be taken away. Chang'e and the others were of course very regretful. Just when they were about to leave the woods with extreme disappointment, Zhang Xiaohua found an excuse to leave for a moment. She returned to the woods and put the rest of the spiritual herbs into her belt. After all, Zhang Xiaohua had to spend a lot of effort to explain how she could ride the wind. In the end, it was not easy to convince them that as long as she practiced the ethereal steps to the 9th level, she could do it. This belt could store so many things. Perhaps even the divine skills of the Misty School could not explain it. Of course, Chun was very curious and asked, "How did you get the ethereal steps?" While Zhang Xiaohua fondly remembered O Peng, Master O, she also told her that this was a secret that Zhang Xiaohua and O Peng could not tell her. Zhang Xiaohua knew that Zhang Xiaohua had obtained the 3rd level of the ethereal steps, so now, after listening to Zhang Xiaohua's words, he was convinced. Therefore, Chun pestered Zhang Xiaohua again to tell her what happened after Zhang Xiaohua was in Shitsue Mountain. She only regarded Zhang Xiaohua as a hero, and her eyes were full of stars. "I'm helpless, helpless." Thinking about how her mouth was dry from talking with Zhang Xiaohu, Chang'e, and Chun these days, Zhang Xiaohua felt a lingering fear. This trick of making up a story can only be done by those literati. "I'm a rough person, so I can't do it. I was almost exposed several times, but I'm quite skilled at it after making it up a few times. When we get out of Chuanxiang cult, we can also play with literature and write a few books about chivalry and earn some money." In fact, Zhang Xiaohua did not want to tell the whole story to her second brother and her future sister-in-law. After all, her eldest brother and sister-in-law also knew about it. She could not favor one and discriminate against the other. However, Thinking of the dungeon on Bayou Feng, Zhang Xiaohua had a bad feeling. In such a dangerous place, it was better to keep a secret. She was not only responsible for herself, but also for her relatives. These days, the journey was also leisurely. Zhang Xiaohu had basically adapted to the newly added 20 years' worth of skills. When he occasionally sparred with Zhang Xiaohua, he would not reveal the white line on the top of his head. The wind between his fists and feet was also slowly restrained, gradually returning to the original state. In terms of refining the medicinal power, Chang'e and Chunshun were not as good as Zhang Xiaohu. They could only refine a small part of the remaining medicinal power every day. This was related to the foundation of their meridians and also because they were women. However, they were not in a hurry. After all, they were from a famous family. They knew that the slower they refined, the more solid their foundation would be. Moreover, in just a few days, they had gained several years' worth of skills. They could not even dream of it. So how could they have other thoughts? Therefore, along the way, only Zhang Xiaohua sat in front of the carriage, seemingly driving the carriage. The others hid in the carriage and worked hard. At this time, they had already left the mountain ridge and entered the Yulon Prairie. If there were no accidents, they would reach the mouth of the Yulon Canyon in 2 or 3 days. Thinking of this, Zhang Xiaohua could not help but feel a little depressed. Second brother was found, and he was in good condition. Her task of passing on the incense cult had been completed. Perhaps the next step should be to cultivate at the top of Tianmu Peak. After all, after seeing the abilities of Huang Feng and the Blood Wolf King, her cultivation of the middle qi refining stage was really a little weak. Suddenly, Zhang Xiaohu walked out of the carriage and approached Zhang Xiaohua. He whispered, "What's wrong? Are you thinking about that little fishy of yours?" Zhang Xiaohua was surprised. She curled her lips and said, "Second brother, we haven't seen each other for a few years. You made great progress. Do you think everyone is like you? Once you see elder sister Chang'e, you'll lose your soul and even call out her name in your dreams. Little Fishy and I have a pure relationship of brother and sister." Hee, Xiaohua, you're not young anymore. Do you think I don't know what you're thinking? Haven't you heard of the saying in Lingering Fragrance Peak, guard against fire, theft, and senior brothers? It's referring to senior brothers like you who talk about pure relationships with others. Zhang Xiaohua was dumbfounded. She said, "How can there be such an interesting saying? I've never heard of it." "Oh, that's right. You've only been here for less than 2 months. No wonder you haven't heard of it." Zhang Xiaohu suddenly understood. He then said, If you tell your second brother the secret of using the sword, I'll let your second sister-in-law talk to little Fishy about it." Gosh, Zhang Xiaohua finally understood what her second brother was planning. Zhang Xiaohu was the only one who knew about the dream-chasing sword. Zhang Xiaohua had never mentioned it in front of him. However, Zhang Xiaohu had only seen such a magical thing in the legends of chivalry. He had been itching for it for a long time. Seeing that Zhang Xiaohua did not mention it, he knew that it was an extremely secretive thing. He did not ask about it in front of her and only asked secretly. Zhang Xiaohua only used some gimmicks to coax him. How could Zhang Xiaohu be fooled? Therefore, as long as he found an opportunity, he would come up and coerce her. Second brother, if that's the case, I'll tell this to my second sister-in-law. You're Chun Chen's senior brother. Shouldn't Chun Chen also guard against you? You. Zhang Xiaohu's face turned red. Zhang Xiaohua smiled and said, "Don't ask about this matter. You should focus on cultivating the Misty Seven Swords and use the Jade Water Sword to form the Sword Light. Then, you can go anywhere you want in this world." Speaking of the Jade Water Sword, Zhang Xiaohu took it out from his bosom and caressed it lovingly. He smiled and said, "Forget it. Seeing that you've given me a treasured sword, I won't force you. However, if you want to force the sword out, you'll need at least 50 years of cultivation." While they were talking, the Blood Wolf King howled and ran over from a distance. Hearing the sound, Zhang Xiaohua was stunned. "Second brother, is there something up ahead?" "Come, there are more chapters." Chapter 685. Zhang Xiaohu thought for a moment and nodded. "That's right. We are not loved by our grandparents, and no one cares about us. This is a good excuse. Zhang Xiaohua smiled and said, the key is that you should have strong martial arts, but I shouldn't have strong martial arts. So you can be my saviors. Then her eyes lit up and said, I can use this excuse to visit you at Shurxin Peak. Isn't this the best of both worlds? Good, this matter is settled. It's just a word, right? Speaking of female disciples, it seems that Shiyu Hall doesn't have any female disciples, but Chinkan Hall seems to have some. But I don't know if any of the female disciples of Chinkan Hall came this time. Well, there are also female intersect disciples and intersect alchemy disciples. When I was in the trial, I saw a female intersect alchemy disciple. It's unlikely that there are female intersect disciples. Their martial arts are very high, so how could they fall into this ordinary Yulan Twilight Canyon? If it's possible, then she must be one of the intersect alchemy disciples you mentioned. Zhang Xiaohua nodded. Zhang Xiaohu's analysis was not wrong. Judging from the woman's meridians and residual internal force, this woman's martial arts were about the same as the intersect alchemy disciple Zhang Pinger. Perhaps they both came to the Yulan Grand Canyon to collect rare spiritual herbs. Only the two of them could run around in this Yulan Grand Canyon. Zhang Pinger's luck was good. She had bumped into him 3 times, which was why she didn't turn into beast dung early on. This woman's luck was slightly worse. She bumped into him before she died. The more she thought about it, the more reasonable it was. At this time, Chun Xin shouted, 2 scholars, we have finished our work. Should we carry her to the front of the carriage? Chang Ji's arm was injured and was fixed by Zhang Xiaohua. Most of the cleaning and dressing was done by Qin Shun. At this time, her forehead was already sweating. Zhang Xiaohua turned around and walked to the woman's side. He looked at her face that had already been washed. The 2 eye sockets were very miserable without any eyeballs. He took out a handkerchief from his pocket and wrapped it around her eyes. He said, wait a moment. I still have to straighten the bones in her head. Then she said to Zhang Xiao, second brother, help me get some straight branches. I have to fix this woman's broken bones. Saying this, she covered the woman's head with her hand and lifted it up. As Zhang Xiaohua's right hand left, the woman's hair fell off, revealing a pale and blood-stained scalp. Zhang Xiaohua put her hand on the head again and silently used her genuine qi to move the displaced skull back to its original position. Then she took water from Chun Shun and carefully washed the head, applying the blood coagulation pill. At this time, Zhang Xiaohu took the branches back. Zhang Xiaohua fixed the woman's thighs and arms one by one. Finally, she took out a jade bottle from her bosom and wanted to pour out a bone coagulation pill. But when she held it in her hand, she muttered. After thinking for a while, she took it back and took out another jade bottle from her bosom. She poured out 2 pills and fed them to the woman. Seeing Zhang Xiaohua clapping his hands and looking like he was done, the 3 beside him heaved a sigh of relief. They were very lucky to have met Zhang Xiaohua. If it weren't for him, they would have lost their lives. Even if they had come here and met this dying female disciple, they probably wouldn't have been able to help even if they wanted to. However, Chun Xin was very surprised to see that Zhang Xiaohua could take out different kinds of pills from her bosom and asked, how many pills do you have? Hee. Zhang Xiaohua looked unfathomable. I can't tell you. I can't tell you. Chang'e asked, what kind of pills did you give her? Is it the bone coagulation pill? Why did you change it in the middle? Zhang Xiaohua shook her head. No, it's the small bone coagulation pill. Then she explained, she is an inner disciple. This bone coagulation pill is not from the fragrance cult. If it is found by her teacher, it seems that we can't explain it. Although we want to save her, we can't get ourselves involved. Well, Sister Chang'e, don't worry. Although these 2 small bone coagulation pills are not as good as the bone coagulation pill, they are enough. They are not from the fragrance cult? Qin Shun and Chang'e were stunned. Seeing that they were a little stunned, Zhang Xiaohua said with a smile, Sister Chang'e, you and Qin Shun can tidy up the second carriage. Put more dry and soft things on it. I'll send her to the carriage now. Okay. Chang'e and Chun Xin woke up from their dream and hurried back to tidy up. Soon, they waved their hands in the carriage. Zhang Xiaohua knew that everything was ready. She silently ran her genuine chi and cast several incantations to fix the woman's body. Then she stretched out her arms to hold the woman steadily and slowly sent her to the carriage. After everything was done, the four of them got on the carriage again. Chun Chin didn't forget to ask, "Is she alone in the carriage behind? Do you need me to keep an eye on her?" Zhang Xiaohua smiled. "No, if there is no big change, she will not wake up for 10 days or half a month. You can't do anything by her side." Chen Chen's face was full of longing. She said, "Zhang Xiaohua, your medical skills are really good. Did you learn from Yes Xiaoyu?" Gosh, Zhang Xiaohua's face was full of black lines. She regretted telling them too much. Then she said angrily, "I learned from her senior brother." "Well, let's not talk about it. We still have to hurry, but we have to slow down in the future. Don't let the carriage be too bumpy. It will probably take one more day." Hee hee, one more day is one more day. Chen Shun picked up the little black dog from the carriage and looked at the blood wolves surrounding the carriage. "There are also some other beasts around," she said with a smile. "With these beasts protecting us, I'll just treat it as a spring walk." Of course, with Zhang Xiaohua's protection and the protection of hundreds of blood wolves around the carriage, Chen Shun and the others were naturally not in any danger. 5 days later, they steadily approached the mouth of the Yulon Grand Canyon. Seeing the mouth of the canyon, Zhang Xiaohua didn't dare to let the blood wolves go any further. If the people of the fragrance cult saw a pack of blood wolves escorting them, wouldn't they transfer the hatred of the many disciples to them? After a few days of getting along, the Blood Wolf King gradually became more intelligent and was more familiar with Zhang Xiaohua. When it saw Zhang Xiaohua rubbing its head and pointing in the direction they came from, it already understood what he meant. It was just that it was reluctant to leave, so it rubbed its head on Zhang Xiaohua's body and licked Zhang Xiaohua's hand with its tongue. This guy is becoming more and more like the big yellow dog from the Guozhuang house. Zhang Xiaohua thought maliciously. Then he walked to the back of the carriage and carried Chang'e and the others. He picked up the little yellow mink and the little black dog and placed them in front of his chest. The hundreds of blood wolves and other beasts all growled and prostrated themselves on the ground as if they were worshipping him. Then they got up, shook off the dust, and left in the direction they came from. Not long after, they all disappeared without a trace. Zhang Xiaohua held the little mink and the little dog in his arms and turned the carriage around. He said with a smile, "Okay, the master who sent the guests off has returned. We should go back." At this time, Chun Chin shouted, "Where's my little black dog? Give it back to me." "Gosh," Zhang Xiaohua curled his lips and said, "It's clearly mine. When did it become yours?" However, as he spoke, he still took out the small black puppy that was not much bigger than a mouse and handed it over. However, the little black puppy that had been sleeping in Chun Chin's arms all this while was not behaving well at this moment. Its eyes were closed, and its little head was swaying left and right. Its little nose was sniffing nonstop, and its entire body was twisting here and there. Chun Chun did not understand and wondered, could it be that this little black puppy is female? It stuck to Zhang Xiaohua when he hugged it. As he said that, he handed it over to Zhang Xiaohua. Indeed, once the little black dog was in Zhang Xiaohua's hands, its nose stopped twitching and it obediently bent down. Its little head even tried to burrow into Zhang Xiaohua's arms. The other two were also a little dumbfounded. Along the way, Zhang Xiaohua did not pay much attention to the little black dog. It was almost always carried by Chen Shun. How could it be ungrateful when it passed through Zhang Xiaohua's arms? I knew it. This little black dog must be a girl. Chen Shun was very indignant. Fine. Seeing the little black dog like this, Zhang Xiaohua did not hand it over to Chen Shun. There were two little mice on the left and right, and he could hold as much as he wanted in his arms, so he still put it together with the little mink. Next to the little mink was a small primordial stone that Zhang Xiaohua usually used for cultivation. The carriage traveled for another half an hour and had already arrived at the mouth of the canyon. It was the place where Huang Feng killed the disciples of Wuming Hall that day. At that time, when Zhang Xiaohua escaped, the mouth of the valley was still piled up like a mountain. The bodies of many disciples were casually thrown at the mouth of the valley. At this time, the mouth of the valley was clean. There were only black bloodstains on the ground, scattered long swords, and tattered rags occasionally blown away by the wind, indicating that there had been a heroic moment here. Zhang Xiaohu and the other two did not witness it with their own eyes, but with Zhang Xiaohua's narration, they also saw their fellow disciples become food in the mouth of the blood wolf. Naturally, they could empathize with the tragedy at that time. Now that they saw the ground that had long been soaked in blood, they could not help but become solemn. It was just that the mouth of the valley was too clean, which made Zhang Xiaohua a little puzzled. The bodies of so many disciples of Wuming Hall, were they taken away by the people of the fragrance cult? Or were they eaten by the ferocious beasts in the Yulon Grand Canyon? However, Zhang Xiaohua would not ask such questions to Chang'e and Qin. After waiting for a while, she said, "Second brother, it's going to be dusk soon. Do you know the time and route to leave the valley?" Zhang Xiaohu raised his eyes to look at the sun that was still hanging in the west. He nodded and said, "I know. Before we entered the valley, the hall master specially explained everything, especially the matters of entering and exiting the valley. Everyone remembered it by heart. This time is just right. When we reach the dense forest, we should be able to leave." "Good. Second brother, from now on, I am the disciple of the pill repository hall that you saved." After saying that, she jumped into the third carriage and sat obediently with a frightened expression on her face. Seeing Zhang Xiaohua's behavior, Qinshan almost burst out laughing. "Zhang Xiaohua, the valley is still far away. Why are you pretending so early?" "I'm just practicing. It's been a long time since I tricked people. I'm a little rusty." Zhang Xiaohua said in all seriousness. "Okay, let's go." Zhang Xiaohu patted the elk's buttocks, and the elk pulled the carriage straight out of the Yulon Grand Canyon. Seeing the huge mountain range receding from her side, Zhang Xiaohua couldn't help but feel a little sad. That day, there were nearly 500 disciples who entered the valley. However, when it ended, only 9 of them survived. She wondered what kind of expression the hall master of the pill repository hall, Old Man Zishun, would have on his face if he knew this news. So let bygones be bygones. Senior brothers, may your souls rest in peace. Zhang Xiaohua stood up and looked back at the valley entrance that was getting narrower and narrower. She secretly prayed in her heart. The Yulon dusk refinement was finally over. Chapter 686. It was still early when Zhang Xiaohua and the others came out of the valley and came to the open space between the valley and the dense forest. The setting sun was still high in the sky. Zhang Xiaohua pretended to stay in the third carriage. After looking for a long time, she did not see any disciples of the fragrance cult. Could it be that the trial has already passed? Zhang Xiaohua was a little surprised. She counted with her fingers and found that it had only been 20 days. Was 1 month too long? Could it be that the inhibition has been activated in advance? Zhang Xiaohua frowned for a while. Seeing that there was no one around, Zhang Xiaohua flew to Zhang Xiaohu's carriage. Zhang Xiaohu, who was driving the carriage, was surprised. He patted his chest and said, "Xiaohua, your lightness skill is too good. I heard from my master that Master O is just so. Pretend, just pretend," Zhang Xiaohua said with a smile. "I didn't see you speak so exaggeratedly at home. Now, why are you so?" Chang'e, who was behind the carriage, asked. "Xiaohua, what was your second brother like at home?" "Nothing, Sister Chang'e. When my second brother was at home, he was a flower in the field. Everyone praised him." Uffed. Chun and Chang'e both laughed and said, "We heard your second brother say that a flower in the field depends on dung." Zhang Xiaohua was a little dumbfounded. Then she rolled her eyes and was about to speak, but she was interrupted by the blushing Zhang Xiaohu. He said, "Why don't you pretend to be injured in the back? What are you doing here?" Zhang Xiaohua shrugged and said, "There is no one here. Who will see me?" When Qinshan heard this, he suddenly said, "By the way, Zhang Xiaohua, since you can pretend to be seriously injured, why don't you just pretend to be dead? There's no need to return to the pill expanding hall. Follow us to Shishine Peak." A few days ago, Didn't you ask about your villa master O and Sister Chiao Tong? Come with us now. They might be very happy to see you. Io. Zhang Xiaohua slapped her head and said, That's a good idea. Why didn't I think of it? Inside the carriage, Chang Gu smiled and said, It's a pity that Xiaohua can't change her appearance. If it's the same as changing her name, she can change into another person. Otherwise, although the fragrant cult is big, it will be seen by the disciples of the Pill Tower Hall. At that time, it will be bad. Zhang Xiaohu also sighed and said, How can it be that easy? Even if she can change into another person, there will be one more person in our Shirxin Peak. How can the fragrant cult not know? In fact, Zhang Xiaohua immediately realized that Chun Chun was joking with her. She also said, Unless I become one of the disciples who came here for the trial, otherwise, don't mention it. Speaking of the disciples of the Misty Hall, Zhang Xiaohu and the rest were equally sad. They recalled the cheerful voices and laughter of their fellow disciples. These were the elites of the Misty Hall. Now, all of them were buried in the Yulon Grand Canyon. Only the 3 of them managed to return. For the Misty Hall, it was like adding one disaster after another. However, thinking of the rare spiritual herbs in the 4 carriages and the situation in the Misty Hall, they only hoped that the harvest this time could slightly compensate for the loss. Suddenly, Zhang Xiaohua slapped her forehead again and said, I forgot one thing. Oh, forget it. Let's talk about it when I have time to go to Shirxin Peak in person. Qinshan was curious and asked, What is it? Zhang Xiaohua smiled and said, I don't know if Sister Chiao Tong is married. If she is, we have to be careful about this matter. Qinshan was even more puzzled and said, No, Chiao Tong and Oyen are all alone. That's good. Zhang Xiaohua smiled and said, I still have the confession letter from Sister Chiao Tong's admirer. After that, she told them about her exploration of the righteous alliance in the past. When everyone heard this, they couldn't help but sigh. Needless to say, this disciple of the Misty School must have been buried in the unforgettable annihilation of the Misty School's disciples. If not for Chiao Ju's intentions, this disciple's intentions would have dissipated between heaven and earth. Well, you have to personally pass this letter to Chiao Tong. Chang'e also agreed to comfort this disciple's soul in heaven. While talking, the 4 carriages had already reached the edge of the dense forest, but the white fog still covered the entire forest. How could they see the way out? Zhang Xiaohua frowned and said, Second brother, do you think the restriction of Twilight Orchid will be closed in advance? When Zhang Xiaohua heard this, his expression changed, and he said, It's really hard to say. When the 2 people in the carriage heard this, they also walked out. Zhang Xiaohua said, I don't know what you told us when you came, but since it can be opened in advance, it's very likely that it will close in advance. It's been more than 20 days, so it's normal for there to be some changes. Chun Chun said involuntarily, If we can't get out, won't we have to stay here for 5 years? And it said that the disciples who didn't get out in time, even the inner disciples, have never been seen again. Zhang Xiaohua didn't agree with this. He had seen the remarkable power of Huang Feng with his own eyes, and also saw the fall of Huang Feng and He Jian. He roughly knew that these were probably the actions of those 2 in the past. Now, little Huang Feng and little He Jian were in his arms, waiting for him to be their father. How could he and the others follow in the footsteps of others? Zhang Xiaohu looked at the graceful Chang'e on the carriage, and a smile appeared on his lips. He thought to himself, If it's like this, then it's a kind of immortal-like life. Chang'e also understood Zhang Xiaohu's thoughts and nodded slightly at him. Zhang Xiaohu's heart was instantly filled with sweetness. Not to mention the 2 of them, the sun on the western mountain ridge was halfway down. Chun Chun looked at the dense fog in the forest and said in surprise, Senior sister, senior brother, look, the white fog has begun to recede. Zhang Xiaohu and Chang'e reluctantly moved their eyes away from each other and looked into the forest. Sure enough, the milky fog was gradually retreating from the edge of the forest into the forest. The more it retreated, the clearer it became. Fortunately, Zhang Xiaohua also felt relieved. Although it was not necessarily a bad thing to be able to live freely in the Yulon Grand Canyon for 5 years, he still wanted to pass the news of Zhang Xiaohu's survival to the Guozhuang house as soon as possible, so that his parents could live peacefully in their old age. Get ready, Xiaohua. This is the last part of the trip out of the valley, so there isn't much danger. But you still have to be careful. Don't fail at the last step. I know, second brother. When we came in, our caravan encountered a lot of accidents. While they were talking, the 4 elks pulling the carriage suddenly panicked. They knocked their hooves and retreated slightly. Zhang Xiaohua frowned and suddenly remembered that when the yellow wind chased the inner disciples of the lingering fragrance peak, it only chased them to the entrance of the valley and stopped, not daring to take half a step forward. The elks were also wild beasts in the Yulon Grand Canyon. How could they reach the edge of the forest? Oh no, if the elks can't pass through the forest, or if they're afraid of the forest, what should we do? While he was thinking, Zhang Xiaohua's heart gave him another warning. His spiritual sense was currently suppressed by the restriction of the fragrant religion and was also absorbed by the silver eye in his left hand. He could only see about 3 meters ahead of him, which was far less effective than when he first started the Yulon Twilight refinement. His heart was on alert, and presumably, danger wasn't far away. Without thinking, Zhang Xiaohua took out several jade talismans from his bosom and crushed them with his hands, throwing them around the 4 carriages. 4 water-like ripples were transmitted from the restriction, and the 4 elks gradually calmed down. However, they were still hesitant as they looked at the forest in front of them. At this moment, the setting sun had already approached the mountain range of the Yulon Grand Canyon. A ray of brilliance streaked across the sky and illuminated the forest. Not long after, a path of light appeared from afar and meandered under everyone's feet. However, this path of light was clearly not as bright as when Zhang Xiaohua and the others had first entered. Now, it was much dimmer. Needless to say, anyone who saw it knew that there wasn't much time left on this path of light. Or perhaps it wouldn't exist for long, so they needed to pass through it in time. Zhang Xiaohua didn't dare to be negligent. He asked Chang'e and Chun for several silk scarves and other things, and covered the eyes of the elks. They were like the fragrant religion's caravan crossing the mountain stream. The blindfolded elks were much more stable, but in this case, Chang'e and Chun would each need a carriage. And this was in line with Zhang Xiaohua's previous plan. In addition, each of them had to drive a carriage, so it was reasonable. Zhang Xiaohua drove the first carriage, followed by Chang'e, Chun, and Zhang Xiaohua, of course, was still at the back. Moreover, he was still standing high on the carriage. He released his divine sense to cover the 4 carriages. The path of light was still calm, strange, and long. After traveling for more than half an hour, they still didn't see any movement. Instead, there were some inexplicable attacks from the dense forest from time to time. They gently hit the restriction that Zhang Xiaohua had previously placed on the carriage. It was unknown whether the attacks were aimed at the group or the elks. Although the attacks were silent, and Zhang Xiaohua and the others didn't notice, they were frequent. Not long after, the restriction of the jade talisman was broken. Zhang Xiaohua had to use the jade talisman again. After traveling for more than half of the distance, Zhang Xiaohua's defensive jade talisman had been exhausted. He didn't expect to encounter such a situation. He couldn't bring enough jade talismans with him, so Zhang Xiaohua could only take out primordial stones to absorb the primordial qi and replenish the magic incantation for the 4 carriages. However, the speed of absorption was far slower than the speed of consumption. Seeing that 2 hours were almost up, the true qi in Zhang Xiaohua's body was also exhausted. Seeing that there seemed to be no end to the path of light ahead, Zhang Xiaohua was very anxious. At this time, he understood the feeling of senior brother Chun, the leader of Wuming Hall. Would they die here in the end? While he was thinking, he suddenly heard Zhang Xiaohua say with a smile, "Chang'e, hold on a little longer. I have already seen the light ahead." What? Hearing this, Zhang Xiaohua almost fell off the carriage. As the saying goes, when you marry a wife, you forget your mother. This sentence is really right. Your brother is so busy behind you. but you don't even say a word of comfort. Your wife is just pretending, but you are so concerned about her. Sigh, Zhang Xiaohua, this guy, he even got jealous over such things. Chapter 687. On the other side of the forest, more than 10 tall horses were carrying more than 10 middle-aged men with bulging temples. They were wandering in the open space about 20 zhang in front of the forest. The few of them stood slightly forward and stared at the path of light in the forest that was getting dimmer and dimmer. The vigilance in their eyes also disappeared. However, the few of them tightly pulled on the reins of their horses and were determined not to take a step closer to the forest. One of them laughed and said, "Senior Brother Ma, let's go back." Seeing that the path of light has already collapsed, it is impossible for anyone to come out today. Moreover, looking at the white fog in the forest and the condition of the path of light, I don't think it will appear tomorrow. That Senior Brother Ma nodded and said, "Junior Brother Tan's words are very reasonable. According to my experience, today should be the last day of the Valley Orchid Dusk refinement restriction. Tomorrow, we don't have to keep watch." Another said, "Senior Brother Ma has been patrolling this valley for decades. Wasn't it also Senior Brother Ma who noticed the early opening of the Valley Orchid Dusk refinement? Moreover, the hall also rewarded Senior Brother Ma. Since you think the path of light will not appear tomorrow, it must be so. Alas, this year's Valley Orchid Dusk refinement is really strange. It opened early and closed early. Counting with my fingers, it has only been 20 days. There is still a long time before the 1-month deadline. Yes, but compared to the tragedy in the valley, this is nothing. In fact, let's not talk about the tragedy in the valley. Even if there was no yellow wind and the beast tide, just the early closing of the Valley Orchid Dusk refinement would have caused many disciples to die. This tragedy has long been doomed. Not necessarily. The tragedy now is that many of our ordinary disciples have died. Alas, hundreds of people in the Wooming Hall have died without a corpse. Adding the brothers of other halls, the number of people who have lost their lives in the Valley Orchid Dusk refinement is in the thousands. If the Valley Orchid Dusk refinement was closed, the number would be even greater. Even the inner disciples wouldn't be able to come out. Your words are wrong. Do you think our Senior Brother Ma has been guarding here for nothing? Didn't he say a few days ago that the restriction at the Valley Orchid Dusk refinement would be closed? At this time, Senior Brother Ma had a complacent look on his face as he laughed. What a pity. What's the use of knowing the warning signs? This Yulon Grand Canyon is filled with ferocious beasts. Our fragrant religion's disciples have all turned into excrement. That's right. Fortunately, I had already gone through the trial 5 years ago. This is only the outer sect test, so I don't have much confidence. The hall also didn't allow me to enter again. Otherwise, I would also have been buried in the Grand Canyon. Junior Brother Tan's face was filled with lingering fear as he continued. Only, he looked around and whispered, "I heard from the inner disciples that many disciples died at the entrance of the valley. Why didn't they clean up the mess in the hall? It's always good to be buried in peace." Junior Marshal Brother Ma smiled, but didn't say anything. Another person mocked. "Junior Marshal Brother Tan is kind-hearted. Why don't you go in and collect the body? If you ask me, since you dare to enter the valley, you must be prepared to die." To tell you the truth, Junior Brother Tan, I feel that this is... Pat your chest. Don't you feel that the following outer sect test will be much easier? Junior Marshal Brother Tan only smiled and didn't say anything. Senior Brother Ma scolded, "Junior Brother Fan, what are you talking about? They were all fellow disciples. Even if there was some competition, you can't disregard their lives. No matter how you look at it, you have to grieve for them." Grief. If that's the case, then we should ask the inner disciples to bring out the corpses of our Wooming Hall disciples. Moreover, Lingering Fragrance Peak can't just do nothing. These words were somewhat muttered, and Senior Marshal Brother Ma only pretended not to hear. As the three of them talked, the other 10 people stood far away and didn't come forward. Although they didn't have weapons in their hands were very close to the scabbards at their waists. Their eyes glanced at the dense forest from time to time. If there was any abnormality, they could draw their swords in time. Seeing that the dense fog in the dense forest had gathered, the trees and other objects had become blurry. Even the light path out of the forest was not clear. Senior Marshal Brother Ma waved his hand and said, "Let's go." Junior Marshal Brothers, this time's orchid dusk refinement has come to an end. Tomorrow, I will come and take a look and confirm it myself. Okay, Senior Marshal Brother Ma has worked hard. To be honest, when I came here, my hair stood on end. I really didn't want to stay here for a moment. Obviously, all the disciples are in the Death Valley. Why did they make us wait here? Everyone turned their horses around. One of them smiled and said, "It's just to let the other disciples who haven't gone through the trial see that the cult of fragrance won't give up any chance to save the disciples." Moreover, a few days ago, as he was speaking, this person inadvertently turned his head. His face immediately turned pale with fright as he shouted, "Beast tide, beast tide." This shout didn't matter. The other two people immediately panicked. They didn't dare to turn their heads back. With a shake of the reins, they rushed forward and shouted, "Quickly go and report to the hallmaster." The beast tide really rushed out of the dense forest. The dozen people in the distance had already turned their horses around. When they heard this, they flattered their horses even more, afraid that they would fall behind. Senior Marshal Brother Ma ran a few feet before turning his head back in disbelief. He had been on guard duty here for dozens of years and had never seen any ferocious beast come out, not even a small squirrel. Elk, Senior Marshal Brother Ma was shocked. This was a ferocious beast from the great orchid prairie. How could it run out? Oh no! When Senior Marshal Brother Ma looked carefully, he saw that the elk was pulling a carriage behind it. Moreover, there seemed to be a person in the carriage. Although the carriage was far away, it was a model commonly used by the cult of fragrance. Senior Marshal Brother Ma could recognize it at a glance. His mind raced. Could it be that there are still disciples alive? Just as he was thinking, the forest was already shrouded in fog. The light path also collapsed. At this moment, 3 carriages rushed out of the forest. Senior Marshal Brother Ma hurriedly turned his head and shouted, "Senior Marshal Brothers, please stop. There are still disciples alive." Just when Senior Brother Ma turned around, he missed a scene that he would never forget for the rest of his life. After the 3 carriages, the 4th carriage flew out from the top of the 3rd carriage at the moment the thick fog closed with a whoosh and landed diagonally on the empty ground. And a thin and tall figure, like a ghost, dashed out from under the carriage and landed directly on top of the carriage. The sound of the carriage landing was so loud that even Zhang Xiaohu, who was walking in front, was stunned. He immediately turned his head, but when he turned his head, a scene that made his heart ache appeared. He saw that the thin and tall figure had just landed on the carriage. Immediately, his figure swayed twice, and with a pu sound, he spat out a mouthful of blood, Xiaohua. Zhang Xiaohu was shocked and immediately pulled the reins. However, the strangest scene appeared. The elk, whose eyes were covered by a silk scarf, was still energetically pulling the carriage forward. At this moment, its forelegs were soft. There was no need for Zhang Xiaohu and the others to exert any strength. It immediately stopped and fell to the ground, as if there was 1,000 pounds of weight on it. It couldn't even move. Its 4 limbs twitched a few times, followed by a few howls. A mouthful of blood was spat out from its mouth. It seemed that it was going to die on the spot. Senior Marshal Brother Ma's shout and the sound of Zhang Xiaohua's carriage landing attracted the attention of the people who were running for their lives. A few brave people turned their heads and saw the 4 carriages appear in the open space in front of the forest. Therefore, they gradually pressed down on the horse's head. However, when the elk appeared and died, they were terrified. Who would dare to go forward? Even Senior Marshal Brother Ma, who had called out to everyone, hesitated and stopped 200 feet away. At this moment, how could Zhang Xiaohu have the time to look at the elk? He jumped down in a big stride. He didn't even care about his wife and hurriedly ran to Zhang Xiaohua, who was sitting paralyzed on the carriage with a sallow face. He anxiously asked, "Xiaohua, what's wrong with you? Did you injure your meridians?" Zhang Xiaohua smiled and shook her head. Just as she was about to speak, she felt a sweetness in her throat. A mouthful of blood surged up, and she spat out on the ground. Zhang Xiaohu was shocked. He hurriedly took out a jade bottle from his bosom and poured out a unwavering pill. He was about to feed it to Zhang Xiaohua. Zhang Xiaohua hurriedly stopped him and said, "Second brother, it's fine." "What do you mean it's fine? You're already vomiting blood. How can you be fine?" Zhang Xiaohu kicked Zhang Xiaohua and said, "Hurry up and take this jade restoration pill." After spitting out 2 mouthfuls of blood, Zhang Xiaohua felt a lot better. He had just protected the 4 carriages and used up all the Jinqi in his meridians. Moreover, at the last moment, just like when he entered the valley, he didn't have time to get out. If it was a normal day, he would have used his lightness skill to follow. But the moment he flew up, he thought, "This carriage is filled with the spiritual herbs that Zhang Xiaohu painstakingly brought back to the Misty Hall. Not to mention that it is something that second brother cares about. Even if it is brought back to the Misty Hall, many disciples of the Misty School will benefit." When he thought of this, he knew that he could no longer escape on his own. Thus, he forcefully circulated his true qi and flew out of the forest with a cart full of spirit herbs. Although he managed to protect the spirit herbs, he also suffered internal injuries. Zhang Xiaohua forced a smile and said, "It's really fine. Second brother, you should take a look at second sister-in-law first. She must have been frightened just now. She is injured." Zhang Xiaohu was stunned for a moment. Then he understood. He rubbed Zhang Xiaohua's head and said, "You child, what kind of injuries can she have? She's already telling me that she's alive and kicking. Don't worry about her." After saying that, he was about to personally feed the Yuandan pill into Zhang Xiaohua's mouth. Zhang Xiaohua whispered, "Second brother, it's really not necessary. I have other pills here. Moreover, did you forget? Didn't I just pretend to be injured? Isn't this a good opportunity?" Zhang Xiaohu muttered to himself and put the pill into the jade bottle. He was about to stuff it into Zhang Xiaohua's arms and said, "Then quickly take this pill. When you have time, quickly take it. Internal injuries can't be delayed." Zhang Xiaohua's heart warmed. She smiled and said, "It's really not necessary." "Look," after saying that, she took out a jade bottle from her bosom and said, "I have other healing pills. They are even better than the Yuandan pill." Zhang Xiaohu looked at Zhang Xiaohua's seemingly endless supply of pills and hesitated. He naturally knew that if there was a pill better than the Yuandan pill, Zhang Xiaohua would have given it to him. Her words were obviously a lie. Therefore, he glared at her. Chapter 688. Just as Zhang Xiaohua and his brother were pushing the jade rejuvenation pill back and forth, each wanting the other to take it, the people of Wuming Hall in the distance finally came to their senses. Senior brother Ma, junior brother Tan, and the others also braced themselves and came forward. Zhang Xiaohua winked at Zhang Xiaohu. She winked at him and said, "Don't be long-winded, second brother. I have my own way. Just deal with the disciples who are coming. Remember, my name is Ren Xiaoyao, and I'm a disciple of Tuda Hall." Zhang Xiaohu saw that his brother refused to take the pill and sighed in his heart. He put away the jade bottle and turned to Chang'e and others who were about to run over. He said, "It's okay. Ren Xiaoyao is fine." Ren Xiaoyao, Chang'e, and Chen also understood. They looked up at the disciples who were approaching and said vaguely, "Oh, that's good." However, they still looked at Zhang Xiaohua with concern and refused to go back. Zhang Xiaohua didn't wipe the blood from the corners of her mouth and just nodded slightly, indicating that they didn't need to worry. At this time, senior brother Ma shouted from afar, "Are you a disciple of our fragrance cult? May I ask which hall you belong to?" It was already dusk, and it was hard to see clearly. Zhang Xiaohu walked to the front of the carriage and looked at the dead elk on the ground. He ignored senior brother Ma's shout and just wondered why the elk died here for no reason. Seeing that Zhang Xiaohu ignored them, senior brother Ma and others had to walk forward about 10 feet and then shouted, "The disciple of the hall in front, please say hello." Zhang Xiaohu raised his head at this time and looked at the disciple of Wuming Hall who was more than 10 feet away with contempt. He shouted, "I'm a disciple of Misty Hall. May I know who you are?" Although Zhang Xiaohu called him senior brother, he didn't show the respect of a senior brother and didn't even tell him his name. Hearing that he was a disciple of Misty Hall, senior brother Ma was surprised and blurted out, a disciple of Misty Hall? How are you still alive?" As soon as he finished speaking, he realized that he had said something wrong and hurriedly urged his horse forward. When he got closer, he looked at the clothes of the four people and cupped his hands. "I am Ma Chi, a disciple of Wuming Hall. May I know your name?" Zhang Xiaohu didn't seem to like the disciples of the fragrant religion. However, seeing that the disciple was so polite, he returned the greeting and said, "I am Zhang Xiaohu from the Misty Hall. These are my two junior sisters." As they spoke, the other disciples also arrived in front of them. A disciple pointed his horsewhip at Zhang Xiaohua and asked, "Who is he?" When Zhang Xiaohua heard this, she hurriedly struggled to get up and said in a low voice, "Senior Marshal Brother, please know. I am an alchemy apprentice from the Tianmu Peak of the Dan Sprouting Hall. My name is Ren Xiaoyao. A few days ago, I was chased by a ferocious beast. Fortunately, this senior marshal brother of the Misty Hall saved me. Until today, I followed them out of the Orchid Valley." Pill Tower Hall? The dozens of people present were even more surprised. The man with the horsewhip frowned and asked, "Are you really a disciple of the Pill Tower Hall?" Zhang Xiaohua asked curiously, "Is this a good disguise?" "This is strange. In this Orchid Valley evening refinement, Shuyu Hall, Qingquan Hall, and others were all wiped out. Even my Wuming Hall only had a few disciples escape. Your Pill Tower Hall had several people escape before. Today, you appear again. This is really puzzling." When Zhang Xiaohua heard this, she felt a little relieved. It seemed that Lu Chaoxian and others had already escaped safely. It was not wrong for her to take the risk to lead the yellow wind away. At this time, a short and fat man next to him said, "Is there anyone else from the Misty Hall alive? Why are you not together after escaping? Who else came back alive?" When Zhang Xiaohu heard this, he was overjoyed and asked eagerly. Senior Brother Ma said with a smile, "A few days ago, only one disciple escaped alive. It seems that his surname is Chun. He is the only disciple who escaped alive in more than 10 days. We thought he was the luckiest one." "Senior Brother Chun?" Zhang Xiaohu looked at the surprised expressions of Chang'e and Chun and asked unconsciously. He didn't say much. He only said that his surname is Chun. "We have sent him back. You can ask him when you go back to Shixin Peak." Senior Brother Ma looked up at the dense forest which had been filled with dense fog and said with a smile, "Junior Brother Zhang is luckier. Today is the last day of the Orchid Valley evening refinement. If you go back tomorrow, you can't even find the way out of the valley." After that, he waved his hand and a whistling arrow rushed into the air. It was the daily communication signal of the fragrance cult. Then a slightly older disciple said, "Junior Brother Ma, give your horses to them first. Let's leave this place first and wait until we arrive at the station of the front hall." Senior Brother Ma and the other two jumped off their horses and led them to Zhang Xiao. Another person said to Zhang Xiaohua, "Ren Xiaoyao, come here and get on the horse with me." He didn't care about Zhang Xiaohua's injury at all. Zhang Xiaohu shook his head and said, "I'm sorry, Senior Brother Ma. Please give us 4 horses. We still have to take these 4 carriages back to Shixin Peak." "Carriages? Why take carriages back?" Senior Brother Ma was a little puzzled. "It was not easy for you to escape. Why do you need carriages?" Zhang Xiaohu didn't explain and shook his head. "In the carriages are the spiritual herbs picked by the disciples of the Misty Hall. I have to take them back to Shixin Peak." This, Senior Brother Ma was a little hesitant. The older disciple said impatiently, "Junior Brother Quan, give your horses to them. They will arrive at the station in a while." Junior Brother Quan had no choice but to jump off his horse and lead his horse to Zhang Xiaohua's carriage. Zhang Xiaohu rushed over and tied the horse to the carriage. Then he went back and settled the 3 carriages. Then he remembered something and pointed to the second carriage. "By the way, I forgot that in addition to saving Ren Xiaoyao of the Pill Expanding Hall, we also met a female disciple who was about to die. However, I don't know which hall she belongs to. I guess she may be an inner disciple." Everyone turned pale with fright. They didn't care about the dense forest and jumped off their horses. The older disciple took the lead and lifted the curtain of the carriage. under the dim light. He looked at the female disciple lying on the carriage. At this time, the female disciple's whole body was bandaged. How could he see anything? The older disciple didn't dare to confirm and said hesitantly, "Junior brother Zhang, how do you know she is an inner disciple?" Zhang Xiaohu sneered. "Except for inner disciples, which hall can let female disciples enter? In such a dangerous time, who can stay alive?" The senior disciple suddenly came to his senses. He no longer hesitated. He waved his hand, and another whistling arrow whizzed into the air. Then, a huge signal appeared in the air. It was an emergency signal that was several times more advanced than the signal of Senior Brother Ma. Then, the senior disciple instructed, "Quickly, the senior sister of the inner court is heavily injured and cannot be delayed. I'll take a few people to drive a carriage and send her to Lingering Fragrance Peak overnight. You guys escort these junior brothers back to First Faith Peak." After saying that, he was about to leave when Zhang Xiaohu shouted, "How can you do that?" The older disciple was stunned and said unhappily, "Why not? Lingering Fragrance Peak has an order. Whenever an inner disciple comes out, we must inform them immediately and escort them back to Lingering Fragrance Peak overnight. Moreover, this senior sister is seriously injured." Zhang Xiaohu smiled and said, "Senior brother, of course you can escort her back to Lingering Fragrance Peak. But I won't lend you this carriage." Junior brother Quan, who was standing at the side, became anxious and berated loudly. "You brat, this is the senior sister of Lingering Fragrance Peak. If anything happens to her, can you, a little disciple of Misty Hall, bear the responsibility? Your carriage only has some spiritual herbs. Do you think we will be greedy?" Zhang Xiaohu shook his head. "I don't know if you're greedy or not. First, this senior sister's life is not in danger. Second, the things in the carriage were exchanged with the lives of dozens of disciples of Misty Hall. There is no reason for me to give it to others for free." Junior brother Quan was a little angry. He was angry at this disciple's ignorance and lack of sense of organization. "So be it." The senior disciple thought for a while and said, "Lingering Fragrance Peak and Shirxin Peak are not in the same direction, but we can go together for a while. Let's go together for the time being. When the carriage of Wuming Hall comes, we will escort the senior sister to Lingering Fragrance Peak. Junior brother Tan, you ride a fast horse. Go to the station quickly and find the best carriage." "Yes, senior brother." Junior brother Tan jumped on the horse and hurried away. "Let's go, junior brother Zhang. You take care of your own carriage. I will drive this one." The senior disciple jumped on the carriage carrying the female disciple and said, "Okay." Zhang Xiaohu was speechless and let Chang'e and Chun Chun get on the other two carriages. At this time, the senior disciple saw Zhang Xiaohua sitting in the last carriage and said softly, "Junior brother Quan, you don't need to drive the carriage. Take this disciple of Pill Expanding Hall to Baiyu Peak." Hearing this, junior brother Quan was very unhappy, but he couldn't say anything. He had to take the reins from a disciple and scolded Zhang Xiaohua impatiently. "Let's go, little pharmacist. I will send you back to Pill Expanding Hall." Zhang Xiaohu was anxious and said, "He is injured. Let him sit in the carriage. When the carriage comes, it will not be too late to send him away." The senior disciple also said disdainfully, "No, it's just a minor injury. He can hold on for a while. It's only a day's journey to Baiyu Peak by taking a shortcut. There's a place to rest in the middle. We will arrive at noon tomorrow. The earlier we leave, the earlier we can go back to Pill Expanding Hall. Moreover, Baiyu Peak is not in the same direction as Lingering Fragrance Peak and Shirxin Peak." Well, Zhang Xiaohu didn't know what to say. He really didn't want his injured brother to go back with a bumpy journey, but he had no reason to keep Zhang Xiaohua. Zhang Xiaohua stood up with difficulty and cupped one hand in the other before his chest. "Senior brother Zhang, thank you for saving my life. When I return to Baiyu Peak and recover from my injury, I will go to Shirxin Peak to thank you for your kindness. Then, well, junior brother Ren, take care." Zhang Xiaohu was reluctant to part with him. Chang'e and Chun Chun also looked at him eagerly. Zhang Xiaohua nodded to the three people. Junior brother Quan was already impatient and said, "Get on quickly. If you are late, you won't even be able to make it to the camp." Zhang Xiaohua climbed onto the horse's back with some difficulty. Junior brother Quan shook the reins, and the horse let out a low neigh before galloping away. Zhang Xiaohua looked back at his second brother with great nostalgia. He also knew that even though they were both in the incense cult, it would be extremely difficult for him to see his brother again unless there was a special reason. Chapter 689. The next day, it was a gloomy day. Two horses were galloping on a small mountain path, with the tall and skinny Zhang Xiaohua sitting behind them. At this time, Zhang Xiaohua's face was still as pale as gold, no different from the day before. Senior brother Quan, who was faster than Zhang Xiaohua by 3 or 4 horse lengths, looked back from time to time. Looking at Zhang Xiaohua, who was lagging behind, he scolded impatiently. "Can't you be faster? It's almost noon, and there's still a distance to Baiyu Peak. Even if you take a shortcut, you won't be able to get any closer." The senior disciple of Wuming Hall was right. This was indeed a shortcut, but this shortcut was abnormally rugged and bumpy. It was basically using difficulty to exchange for distance. Zhang Xiaohua had just been injured. How could he travel like this? 2 hours ago, he had spat out a mouthful of blood and did not dare to increase the speed of his horse. Senior brother Quan saw this and changed from urging him to nagging. Zhang Xiaohua looked at him coldly and did not reply. He carefully steered the horse and picked a stable path to travel. Around midnight last night, he and senior brother Quan had arrived at Wuming Hall's outpost. Senior brother Quan didn't care whether he was dead or alive. He simply threw him into a small hut and went to sleep. It seemed like he was very dissatisfied with the task of escorting Zhang Xiaohua. When Zhang Xiaohua reached the hut, he did not intend to take any elixirs. He originally wanted to use his injury to hide it from the disciples of Pill Expansion Hall. If he took the blood-replenishing elixir and stopped his injury, wouldn't he have failed his plan? But when he checked his meridians, he suddenly found that his meridians were recovering steadily. He did not know where the thing in his meridians came from, but it was repairing the damaged parts bit by bit. Even when he checked his internal injuries, there was a mysterious force that was gradually repairing them. This was going on. Zhang Xiaohua saw that the speed of the repair was even faster than the Yawandan pill. She was completely at a loss. Well, it could only be described as being at a loss. Zhang Xiaohua really did not know how to deal with it. She could only watch helplessly as her meridians were mended and she fell asleep. When he woke up the next day and checked his meridians, he found that almost half of them had been repaired. It was more effective than the Yawandan pill that Zhang Xiaohu and Chang'e took. Well, I was still thinking about taking pills. Looks like there's no need for that now. Zhang Xiaohua laughed at herself. I still wanted to use the meridian-nourishing pill to transform my meridians. Looking at the recovery of my meridians, the meridian-nourishing pill is no match for it. I might as well save it. Alas, what a miserable person. The pills that I worked so hard to refine are not suitable for me at all. Isn't this purely making a wedding dress for others? Seeing that senior brother Quan was rushing with all his strength, Zhang Xiaohua was actually willing to do so. He did not want Bai Yefeng to think that his injuries had been mostly healed. Then, the blood he spat out would have been in vain. However, this mountain path was indeed not suitable for people who were seriously injured, let alone galloping. Even if he had the Yawandan pill, which was a panacea for healing injuries, he still could not prevent his injuries from worsening. At this time, Zhang Xiaohua almost suspected the sinister intentions of the senior disciple of Wuming Hall. After another 2 hours, it was already past noon. The red clouds in the sky were low, and there were even a few rays of sunlight piercing through. It was very dull. Seeing that there was a tall mountain in front of them after turning a corner, senior brother Quan's face showed a trace of a smile. He looked back at Zhang Xiaohua, who was already 10 horse lengths behind, and said with a smile, "Well, we've arrived at your hometown." After that, he still ignored Zhang Xiaohua and galloped straight to the front of the mountain. Before he got close, he heard someone shouting on the side of the road, "Excuse me, Is this senior brother from Wuming Hall? Senior brother Quan was not surprised. He immediately reined in his horse and laughed loudly. I am Quan Bewley, a disciple of Wuming Hall. A disciple of Pill Tower Hall, holding a long sword, came out from the side of the road. He came in front of Quan Bewley's horse and bowed respectfully. Senior brother Quan, what can I do for you to come to Bai Yefeng? While they were talking, Zhang Xiaohua, who was lagging behind, also caught up. Seeing a disciple of Pill Tower Hall on the side of the road, she was surprised and stopped her horse. Her chest tightened, and she spat out a small stream of blood. This is... The disciple of Pill Tower Hall obviously did not know Zhang Xiaohua. Quan Bewley was a little surprised when he heard this. He felt something was wrong last night, but he could not tell what it was. He had been on the road since dawn, so he did not pay attention to it. At this time, when he heard the disciple of Pill Tower Hall ask such a question, his mind unconsciously lit up. Of course, the person riding behind him, who looked tired, was not wearing the uniform of Pill Tower Hall. No wonder he felt awkward. It was dark last night, so he did not notice it. Quan Bewley could not help but have a trace of vigilance. He scolded, Ren Xiaoyao, are you a medicine boy of Pill Tower Hall? Zhang Xiaohua was speechless. She straightened her back and said snappily, what's the point of pretending to be a medicine boy of Pill Tower Hall? She then cupped her hands and said to the disciple of Pill Tower Hall, Senior brother, I am the medicine boy of head Chun Feng Xiao of Tianmu Peak. My name is Ren Xiaoyao. I went to participate in the Orchid Dusk refinement and just escaped with my life. Orchid Dusk refinement? You? The disciple of Pill Tower Hall felt a little incredulous. Then, he looked at Quan Bewley. Quan Bewley thought for a while and said, this guy really came out of the Orchid Grand Canyon. I can guarantee this, but at this point, he did not continue speaking. Zhang Xiaohua sneered and turned to the disciple of Pill Tower Hall. I followed Lu Chaoxian and other senior brothers out of the canyon, but later I was chased by fierce beasts. This time, before Zhang Xiaohua finished speaking, the disciple of Pill Tower Hall interrupted Zhang Xiaohua in surprise. He pointed at her and shouted, You are Ren Xiaoyao. Yes, Ren Xiaoyao, I know it's you. Ha! You risked your life to lead the fierce beast away. The disciple seemed a little inarticulate as he spoke. Quan Bewley's face froze when he heard this. He glanced at Zhang Xiaohua, but immediately relaxed. He cupped his hands and said to the disciple of Pill Tower Hall, So, this junior brother is a disciple of your Pill Tower Hall. Yes, this junior brother should be Ren Xiaoyao. That's good. Then I'll leave him to you. I'll go back to Wuming Hall to report. Then, the disciple of Pill Tower Hall could not say anything. He turned his horse and headed in one direction. The disciple of Pill Tower Hall behind him was taken aback, and then shouted, Senior brother, did you go the wrong way? That direction is to Lingering Fragrance Peak. This direction is to Dragonhead Peak. It was a pity that Quan Bewley had already gone far away, and no one knew if these words had reached his ears. Hearing the senior brother of Pill Tower Hall remind Quan Bewley, Zhang Xiaohua finally understood that the reason for rushing here last night and today was not for anything else, but for the inner court female disciple that she had saved. At this time, the senior brother of Pill Tower Hall came forward and cupped his hands. Junior brother Run, I'm Li Chengxiu, a disciple of the Pill Department of White Mountain Peak. Junior brother is famous. Although there's no public praise, but in private, all the disciples admire you. Zhang Xiaohua reluctantly cupped her hands and coughed. It's nothing. Cough, cough. Seeing this, Li Chengxiu hurriedly took out a jade bottle and handed it over. Junior brother Ren, could it be that you've taken all the elixirs? These are some blood coagulation pills. I don't know if junior brother needs them. Please accept them. Seeing this, Zhang Xiaohua's heart warmed. She waved her hand and said, Thank you, senior brother. This is an internal injury. The blood coagulation pills probably won't work. I appreciate senior brother's kindness. As she spoke, a trace of blood seeped out of the corner of her mouth. Li Chengxiu hurriedly said, Junior brother, wait a moment. I'll get the carriage to come down. Without waiting for Zhang Xiaohua to speak, she sent out a signal. Then she smiled and said, Junior brother, get off the horse and wait for a moment. The carriage will come in a while. You're injured so badly, it's not suitable for you to ride a horse. Zhang Xiaohua had a smile on her face. She thought for a moment and said, Senior brother Li, I think it's better to go forward. I've been rushing here for half a day. A little bit of time doesn't matter. Oh, Junior brother's words make sense. Li Qingxiu nodded and said, The hall master has ordered that all the disciples who escaped from the Orchid Dusk must go to 100 Herb Hall. Junior brother, come with me. After he finished speaking, he pulled out a horse from the side and leaped onto it. Then, he led Zhang Xiaohua forward. As they walked, they heard Zhang Xiaohua ask, Senior brother Li, I remember that when we came to White Mountain Peak before, our pill hall didn't set up any sentries at the foot of the mountain. Now, Li Qingxiu smiled and said, Isn't it because of the Orchid Dusk? Then there was some fear on her face, and she said, This time, more than 500 people from our pill hall were buried in the belly of the beasts. Although I don't know the number of people from the other halls, basically no one was able to come out alive. It caused the various peaks to be in a state of panic, fearing that some beast would rush out of the Orchid Grand Canyon. Not only are there sentries at the foot of each mountain, even Wuming Hall has set up stations all over the sect. If there's any movement at any of the halls, they can provide support. With that, she curiously asked, Junior brother, I want to ask, I heard that the beast was very fierce. How did you escape with your life? Zhang Xiaohua had already prepared the answer to this question. She smiled and said, Senior brother, I only know a little bit of martial arts. At that time, it was critical, and I only wanted to use my Qing Gong to escape as far as possible so that I could lead the invisible beast away and let Senior brother Liu and the others escape. I ran until everything turned dark, and I didn't know where I ran to. Later, I was saved by the senior brothers of the Misty Hall and followed them out of the Grand Canyon. Think about it, with my martial arts, even the inner and outer disciples can't deal with the beast. How can I be sure? It's just pure luck and good character. Li Qingxiu was stunned for a moment. He didn't expect Zhang Xiaohua to say so. He unconsciously gave a thumbs up and said, Junior brother Run, you are benevolent and righteous. But in her heart, she secretly said, Sure enough, he's a young man who just came to spread the incense sect. He doesn't know the immensity of heaven and earth. Alas, it can be said that fortune favors fools. Chapter 690. Not long after, Zhang Xiaohua and Li Qingxiu came across a carriage coming down from the mountain. Zhang Xiaohua did not decline and boarded the carriage, still looking sickly. On the Baiwei Peak, inside the pill repository hall, everything was the same as before. There were absolutely no cries of grief, as Zhang Xiaohua had imagined. Every disciple she encountered was in a hurry and did not even look at Zhang Xiaohua, who was in the carriage. It was as if nothing had happened. When the carriage arrived at the 100 Herb Hall, Zhang Xiaohua alighted. Li Qingxiu smiled and said, Junior brother Ren, wait here. I will go and report. The hall master will definitely reward you later. Zhang Xiaohua smiled and said, I hope so. Li Qingxiu turned and entered the courtyard. Inside the 100 Herb Hall, Elder Zi Shun was frowning and drinking tea. He seemed to have some difficult matters to settle. When he heard someone report, he casually called them in. Li Qingxiu entered the room and said respectfully, Congratulations, Hall Master. Another disciple from our Pill Repository Hall who participated in the Twilight Orchid refinement has returned safely. Elder Zi Shun was stunned. He raised his eyebrows and said, This fellow is quite lucky to be able to return alive. I thought there were only 8 people. Oh, what kind of spiritual herbs did he bring back? This. Li Qingxiu was a little hesitant and said, This disciple is seriously injured and was escorted back by the Wuming Hall's disciples. It seems like he did not bring the carriage back. The spiritual herbs. When Elder Zishin heard this, he laughed coldly and said, Since he did not pick any spiritual herbs, it means that he did not complete the mission. According to the past, he would be punished. However, it is different this time. It is already good that he managed to escape with his life, so there will be no punishment. Go and let him return early so that he can recuperate. Then, He waved his hand and sent Li Chengxiu out. Li Chengxiu was a little anxious and said, "This, Hall Master, this disciple is Ren Xiaoyao from Tiemu Peak." Tiemu Peak? Ren Xiaoyao? Elder Zishun was stunned and said unhappily, "Is he very famous? Isn't he just Shun Fengxiao's subordinate? Is there a need for me to know him? This Chen Fengxiao is really lucky. The 9 survivors are all from Tianmu Peak." Ren Xiaoyao seems to have some impression of him. Elder Purple Herb looked at Li Chengxiu and said, "If you have anything to say, just say it. I'll pardon you." Li Chengxiu cupped his hands and said, "Sir Hall Master, this Ren Xiaoyao is the Ren Xiaoyao mentioned by Lu Chaoxian and the others who escaped from the Yulon Grand Canyon." Old man Zishun slapped his bald head and said with a smile, "Now I remember the name of this Ren Xiaoyao. Isn't he the prospective son-in-law that was recruited from Rejuvenation Valley this year? No wonder his name sounded so familiar. Why would he go to the Yulon Grand Canyon?" Soon after, he changed his expression and said, I thought he was just an ordinary disciple. Since he was willing to sacrifice himself to save the other disciples, not to mention his martial arts, his moral character is also good. He is a loyal disciple of our Pill Repository Hall and is worthy of praise. Oh, call him in first. I'll ask him." Li Chengxiu wiped the faint sweat on his head, lowered his head, and went out to call Zhang Xiaohua in. Seeing Zhang Xiaohua walk in, Elder Zishan slowly stood up and said with a smile, "Ren Xiaoyao, you're very good." Zhang Xiaohua hurriedly bowed and said, "Greetings, Sir Hall Master. No need to be so polite." Elder Zishan nodded and pointed to the chair next to him, saying, "Have a seat. I'm an old friend of Rejuvenation Valley's Valley Master Nya. You've been here for a long time, but I haven't had the chance to meet you." Zhang Xiaohua didn't dare to be careless. He lowered his head and said, "I'm now a disciple of the Pill Repository Hall and a subordinate of Sir Hall Master. I don't dare to think about anything else." Elder Zishun stared blankly for a moment, then laughed heartily. "Good. Ren Xiaoyao, I like hearing these words of yours. I've been reluctant to meet you all this time, and this is one of my misgivings. I hope you can understand. You should sit down. This Yulon evening refinement really wasn't easy for you. Now that you've been seriously injured, if you don't have a seat at my 100 Herb Hall, wouldn't that disappoint the brothers who enter the valley in the future?" Zhang Xiaohua said in a low voice, "Deference is no substitute for obedience." "Thank you, Sir Hall Master." After he finished speaking, he coughed twice and some blood flowed out. Seeing this, Elder Zishun's expression couldn't help but change slightly. He asked, "How are your injuries?" Zhang Xiaohua hurriedly said, "It's nothing serious. There shouldn't be any problems after a few months of recuperation." Elder Zishun waved his hand and said to the disciple standing by the side, "Go. Take a bottle of the blood coagulation pills, blood replenishing pills, and other healing pills in the hall, and bring them to Ren Xiaoyao." The disciple accepted the order and left. Zhang Xiaohua smiled and said, "I've just finished my medicine. Many thanks for Hall Master's generous gift." Elder Zishan smiled and said, "It's no matter. However, since you've said this old man wants to talk about you. I just heard that you've won quite a few medicinal pills at Tianmu Peak. Why did you exchange them for medicinal herbs? How can you do such a loss-making business?" Zhang Xiaohua said shamefully, "I've just arrived and haven't seen so many medicinal herbs. I was pleasantly surprised and couldn't help but exchange them. Only now do I regret it. If I had paid a visit to Sir Hall Master earlier and received Sir's guidance, how could I have done such a foolish thing?" Elder Zishan chuckled and said, "You've just arrived at the Pill Opening Hall. Why did you suddenly run to the Yulon Grand Canyon to participate in the Yulon Evening Refinement?" Zhang Xiaohua shook his head and said, "I don't know about this. I only said that I was on the list, so I went." "Oh," Elder Zishan nodded. "I reckon that Vice Hall Master soon knows that your martial arts are outstanding, so he sent you. It's also thanks to Vice Hall Master Su's discerning eyes. Otherwise, our Pill Opening Hall would have been completely wiped out. Not a single disciple would have been able to come out." Immediately, he said with a beaming smile, I heard from Lu Chaoxian and the others that they followed you to pick the 100-year-old ice spirit grass and luckily escaped with their lives. I just don't know if you've completed the task assigned by Vice Hall Master Su." Zhang Xiaohua's heart stirred and immediately became panicked. He hurriedly stood up and said, "I'm incompetent. I searched for a long time, but still couldn't find it. I originally wanted to go further to pick it, but I encountered a great change. I didn't dare to go further and only wanted to quickly leave the valley with my senior martial brothers. However, I couldn't complete Vice Hall Master Su's order. Once I've recovered, I'll go to Vice Hall Master Su and ask for forgiveness." "That won't be necessary." Elder Zishun took charge and said, "Although you didn't pick the 100-year-old ice spirit grass, you saved several carriages of medicinal herbs from my pill opening hall. This can be considered as atoning for your crimes. If Vice Hall Master Su comes looking for you, just say that I said it, and there's no need to punish me." Zhang Xiaohua smiled faintly and said, "If Vice Hall Master Su comes looking for me, I'll definitely tell him." Although her smile was very gentle, Zhang Xiaohua was disdainful in her heart. Vice Hall Master Su actually dared to instruct Lu Lihong to kill her. How could she let him off easily? And Elder Zishun drank a mouthful of tea. At this moment, the disciples in the hall also brought a few bottles of medicinal pills. Zhang Xiaohua put them in her arms and expressed her gratitude to Elder Zishun. Sure enough, Elder Zishun was just casually listening. However, when he heard about the Misty Hall, his eyes lit up and he asked, "Disciples of the Misty Hall? They saved you?" "Oh, and they even saved an inner disciple?" Zhang Xiaohua was puzzled and said, "Yes, when I woke up, there were 3 disciples of the Misty Hall. There was no one else beside me. It must be them. Moreover, when they saved that inner disciple, I saw it with my own eyes. They said that the girl was an inner disciple. I don't know anything." "Then, what do you think of the attitude of these disciples towards you?" Zhang Xiaohua was even more taken aback. He said carefully, "It's all right. Although they don't talk much, they're very polite. They saved my life, so how can I be picky? I was thinking of waiting a few months to recover and go to the Shirxin Peak to thank them." "Ha ha!" Elder Zishan laughed and said, "Your idea is good, but it's a little difficult to realize. Even if I want to go to the Shirxin Peak, I have to get the consent of the Lingxiang Peak." Zhang Xiaohua looked guilty and said, "Then I can only wish them success." Elder Zishan stared at Zhang Xiaohua for a long time and seemed to have made a decision. He said with a smile on his face, "Well, Rin Xiaoyao, it's not easy for you. Although you didn't pick the herbs, you saved the lives of 8 people. Oh, I almost forgot. There was also the life of an inner disciple. Moreover, you brought back 4 carriages of herb for the pill sprouting hall. You can be considered as the #1 contributor to this Valley Orchid evening refinement. Not to mention other things, if the pill sprouting hall doesn't reward you, it will make our brothers feel bitterly disappointed. You can go and recuperate. After a while, I will arrange a task for you as a reward." Zhang Xiaohua was stunned and said, "I don't dare to be praised by the hall master. It's what I should do." "Well, you don't have to say anymore. Go back to the Tianmu Peak as soon as possible. Taking care of your body is the most important thing." Old Man Purple Ginseng had an unhappy look on his face as he said, "Clearly distinguishing between reward and punishment is the foundation of this old man's conduct. Since you can perform meritorious service, this old man will reward you." Zhang Xiaohua immediately stood up and said respectfully, "Thank you, Hall Master." Old Man Jishun smiled and waved his hand to signal Zhang Xiaohua to leave. Then, he picked up his teacup and took a sip happily, as though he had just resolved a very important matter. When Zhang Xiaohua sat in the carriage, they immediately arrived at Bai Yefeng. Inside an exquisite little house, Vice Hall Master Su looked at the person in front of the hall in astonishment and said, "Are you sure? Rin Xiaoyao actually came back alive?" The disciple nodded. "That's right. I heard from Li Qingxiu, who was on duty at the foot of the mountain today, that he had already escorted Rin Xiaoyao back to Tianmu Peak." Chapter 691. Yes, I know. Vice Hall Master Su waved his hand and said, "You can leave now." After the disciple left, Vice Hall Master Su rubbed his chin and pondered for a long time. He thought to himself, this guy is really lucky. I wonder if Lu Li Hong made a move? Well, he probably didn't. Otherwise, this guy would have died in the strange birch forest. He wouldn't even be able to see the beast tide, let alone avoid it. Alas, poor Lu Li Hong. He couldn't even handle such a small matter. He deserved to die in the beast tide. He made me lose a few Yuhuandan pill for no reason. If I had known earlier, I would have given it to him after he came back. Well, Ren Xiaoyao must have some tricks up his sleeves to be able to avoid the beast tide. It seems that my guess is right. Humph! How could a little medicine boy from the Rejuvenation Valley have such ability? Not only did he save 8 disciples, but he also managed to escape from the canyon by himself. Even with the help of the Misty Hall's disciples, it's impossible. Even a pig wouldn't believe that there isn't anything fishy about this. Only a frog in a well like purple ginseng would believe that. Orchid Twilight is a good opportunity. Now that I haven't gotten rid of him, he's in the limelight. If I find an excuse in the future, it will be troublesome. Forget it. Let him be for now. He's not the only eyesore in the fragrant cult. I can't deal with them one by one. Vice Hall Master Su stood up and said to himself, this guy is really good at bewitching people. Even if you beat him to death, he won't say anything. We've only known each other for a few days, but they have such a close relationship. It seems that I have to be more careful of him in the future. But fortunately, he didn't cause too much trouble. If he's dissatisfied, he won't come looking for me. If he really comes, don't blame me. While thinking, Vice Hall Master Su seemed to have seen something funny and couldn't help laughing. Zhang Xiaohua returned to Tianmu Peak under the escort of Li Chengxiu and Senior Brother Li. As soon as he arrived at Tianmu Peak, he saw the patrolling disciple. The patrolling disciple seemed to recognize Li Chengxiu. He approached him from afar and cupped his fists. Greetings, Senior Brother Li. Is there any official business for you to drive a carriage to Tianmu Peak? Li Chengxiu returned the greeting and said, there is an official matter. Junior brother, please ask Headmaster Chen to come out. The disciple was stunned. It's Headmaster Chen, not Wu Daolong? That's right. Head Boss Chen, please come over for a chat. Senior brother, please wait for a moment. With that, the disciple hurriedly turned around and left. Zhang Xiaohua sat in the carriage. Seeing that disciple leave, she smiled and said, Senior Marshal Brother Li, what are you doing? You could have just let me go by myself. Why did you have to provoke Headmaster Chen? Li Chengxiu said, Junior Brother Run is the hero of Tianmu Peak. If we don't let him come and pick you up, wouldn't it seem that our pill hall is unkind? Zhang Xiaohua secretly shook her head. In fact, she was a little unhappy when she came out of 100 Herb Hall. Wasn't the purpose of her coming to the incense religion to find her second brother, Zhang Xiao? Since she had already found him, why should she lower her voice to others? Alas, I'm used to keeping a low profile. I can't change it in a short time. I don't even know how to be arrogant. Zhang Xiaohua could only think like this. At this time, Tianmu Peak was similar to the time when Zhang Xiaohua first came. However, there were faint figures around the mountainside. They must be patrolling. Not far away, she met Bai Huan's hut. The light was dim and there was no one. I wonder what Bai Huan is doing now. I wonder if he's been taking care of Huan Huan these days. This guy wouldn't have barbecued Huan Huan when he heard that I was trapped in the Yulon Grand Canyon, right? Zhang Xiaohua suddenly had such a ridiculous thought. Even if Bai Huan was 3 times more courageous, he wouldn't dare to do such a thing. Thinking of Bai Huan's fear of getting into trouble, Zhang Xiaohua secretly laughed. I promised to give him a bottle of blood-replenishing pills when I came back. This sage is so generous. I don't need to pluck his hair anymore. Ha ha ha. Just as she was thinking, she saw a few figures hurrying over from afar. Li Chengxiu smiled and said, Junior Brother Ren, put down the curtains and give Headmaster Chen a surprise. Zhang Xiaohua smiled and hid in the carriage. Chun Fengxiao rushed to the front of the carriage. He first looked at the carriage in surprise. Then he cupped his hands and bowed. Junior Brother Li, what business does the hall have? Li Chengxiu was a disciple of the pill division. Normally, he wouldn't look for him. Since he was looking for him at this hour, it must be something important. Li Chengxiu smiled and said, I have good news for Headmaster Chen. Come, let Headmaster Chen meet someone. As he spoke, he lifted the curtains of the carriage and stood to the side, watching with a smile. Zhang Xiaohua walked out of the carriage in the darkness. He cupped his hands and bowed. Headmaster Chen, I trust you have been well since we last met? If Nie Qinyu was at the side, she would have spat out those words. However, when Chen Fengxiao saw Zhang Xiaohua, he was stunned. He didn't seem to be as surprised as Zhang Xiaohua had imagined. Chen Fengxiao was stunned for a moment. He raised his hand and pointed at Zhang Xiaohua. You, how are you still alive? Seeing Chen Fengxiao lose his composure, Zhang Xiaohua was surprised. Of course I'm still alive. Don't tell me I'm dead? Li Chengxiu, who was at the side, was also embarrassed. She thought to herself, what kind of standard is this? You call yourself the headmaster of Tianmu Peak. You don't even know how to welcome me. If I had known, I wouldn't have put on airs and made such a melodramatic surprise. This is great. Ren Xiaoyao has lost so much face. When he heard Zhang Xiaohua's question, Chen Fengxiao immediately knew that he was wrong. He hurried forward and grabbed Zhang Xiaohua's hand. He said loudly, Little brother, you're finally back. You should know that when I heard that you were buried in the Grand Canyon, I didn't have any appetite for food or sleep. Hearing this, Zhang Xiaohua couldn't help but shrink back. She thought to herself, is there a need for that? You scare me until I had goosebumps all over. Then, Chen Fengxiao wiped away his tears and forced himself to say, but I know that little brother is doing this for our pill repository hall, for our Tianmu Peak, for little brother's unfulfilled wish. I cannot fall. That's why I'm holding on. Every time I can't hold on any longer, little brother's tall back will appear in front of my eyes. Your broad shoulders will give me endless strength, and I will immediately have the motivation to act. It's you, little brother, your actions and your spirit that inspired me, allowing me to integrate myself into the limitless construction of Tianmu Peak. It's you, Ren Xiaoyao, who is selfless. Oh my God. Li Chengxiu, who was at the side, was finally moved. She thought to herself, this is the great manager, Chen, in my heart. I am far from being able to catch up to him. No wonder he is the great manager, and I'm only patrolling. How can I catch up to him? Just as Chen Fengxiao was chattering away, several people came from afar. When they got closer, they were Wu Dalong and the others from the pill department. When Wu Dalong saw Zhang Xiaohua, he looked as if he had seen a ghost. His face was full of excitement. After greeting Li Chengxiu, he walked over and said, Congratulations, little brother. You actually managed to escape from a disaster. As the saying goes, one who survives a disaster is bound to have good fortune in the future. Little brother's future is boundless. Seeing Wu Dalong's unnatural expression, Zhang Xiaohua muttered in his heart. However, he didn't say it out loud. He cupped his hands and said, I'll be counting on Wu Dalong's auspicious words. At this time, Li Chengxiu smiled and said, Since the two heads of Tianmu Peak have appeared, my mission can be considered completed. All right, you guys can bring Ren Xiaoyao over. I'll report back to the White Mountain Peak. Wu Dalong smiled and said, Junior brother Li, you can stay here for the night. It won't be too late to leave tomorrow morning, right? Too late, too late. I still have to report back to Lord Hallmaster. All right, Lord Hallmaster has ordered for Ren Xiaoyao to recuperate carefully. He needs to recover from his injuries first, and, in the future, he stopped here. He smiled embarrassedly and said, Lord Hallmaster didn't say anything else. I can't make wild guesses. Is that so? Wu Zhoushu and Chen Fengxiao looked at each other and exchanged glances. They smiled and said, Then junior brother Li must be careful. Well said, well said. Junior brother Ren, goodbye. I hope to see you on the White Mountain Peak one day. Li Chengxiu cupped his hands and bid farewell to Zhang Xiaohua. Zhang Xiaohua also smiled and bowed. After Li Chengxiu left, everyone came forward to congratulate Zhang Xiaohua. Firstly, Zhang Xiaohua had returned safely. Secondly, she had caught the Hallmaster's eye. She would definitely have a bright future. Zhang Xiaohua smiled and acknowledged them one by one. Blood gushed out from the corner of her mouth. "Io, little brother, are you seriously injured?" At this moment, Chun Fengxiao and the rest finally realized why Li Chengxiu had escorted Zhang Xiaohua over in a horse carriage. They hurriedly instructed, "Quick, arrange a quiet room for little brother and bring some of our Tianmu Peak's medicinal pills over." While they were talking, several people rushed over from afar. Before they even got close, they shouted, "Is Junior Brother Ren back? Wasn't it Lu Chaoxian and the others?" Hearing their anxious and surprised shouts, Zhang Xiaohua's heart warmed. She whispered, "Is it Senior Brother Lu?" "Yes, little brother has returned." "Junior Brother run, Junior Brother run." The 8 of them quickly walked to the front of the carriage. When they saw that it was really Zhang Xiaohua, they immediately burst into tears. They were tears of surprise. They bowed together and said, "Thank you, Junior Brother Run, for saving our lives. As senior brothers, we will never forget it." Zhang Xiaohua hurried forward and helped them up one by one. She said, "Didn't I say earlier that since I am your leader, I must protect you all? Fortunately, I did not disappoint you." But Lu Chaoxian, Senior Brother Wang, and the others choked with sobs. Junior Brother Ren actually put himself in danger and lured the ferocious beast to chase after us, allowing us to escape. This kind of righteousness is really, in fact, when it came to saving people, it was normal to have the strength to do so. However, people like Zhang Xiaohua, who knew that there was endless danger but still fed the tiger with her own body, that was really not easy. In this world, there were not many people who could do this. It was no wonder that Lu Chaoxian and the others desperately wanted to thank Zhang Xiaohua. However, Zhang Xiaohua scratched his head. He really didn't think so. Chapter 692. Seeing Lu Chaoxian and the rest acting like this, Chen Fengxiao felt slightly uncomfortable in his heart. He took a step forward and said, "Junior Brother Lu, Junior Brother Ren has suffered serious injuries in order to save all of you. This is not the place to talk. Let's let Junior Brother Ren return to his room first. After he recovers from his injuries, you can say anything you want." Only now did Lu Chaoxian and the rest notice the bloodstain at the corner of Zhang Xiaohua's mouth in the darkness. They hurriedly slapped their faces and said, "Look at me, I actually didn't notice. Junior Brother Ren is so brave and fierce, yet he is still injured. It must be a serious internal injury." "That's right, Junior Brother Ren was injured because of us. The matter of taking care of him should be none other than us. Headmaster Chun, I have a matter to discuss with you. Please send Junior Brother Ren to our place, and let us take care of him. How about it?" When Zhang Xiaohua heard this, she hurriedly waved her hands and said, "Forget it, forget it. I like peace and quiet. It's better." Before she finished speaking, Chen Fengxiao interrupted with a smile. "Junior Brother Ren, you better not decline. If you hide in peace and quiet by yourself, won't Home Master blame me? I think Junior Brother Lu's idea is not bad. You should go with them." "That's right, Junior Brother Ren, let's go. Yulan Mulian, you have taken care of us the entire way. When we return to Tianmu Peak today, let us brothers take care of you for a few days." After saying this, without any explanation, they clustered around Zhang Xiaohua and headed in a certain direction. When Zhang Xiaohua and the rest were far away, Chun Fengxiao turned to look at Wuzhou ruins. Both of them sighed at the same time, then shook their heads and walked away. It was as if they had encountered an extremely troublesome matter. The place where Lu Chaoxian and the rest stayed was naturally not a peaceful place. However, when they thought of Zhang Xiaohua's injuries and their daily habits, Lu Chaoxian and the rest found a small house where the disciples rested and arranged for Zhang Xiaohua to stay. After that, Zhang Xiaohua smiled and said, "It's going to be night soon. Senior brothers should rest early. Although my injuries are serious, they're not fatal. After taking some elixirs and adjusting my breathing, I should be fine after a few months of rest." "That's good." Lu Chaoxian and the rest smiled and said, "Junior Brother Run, you should rest. During this period of time, we will be around you. We won't disturb you, and will not disturb you. We will stand guard at the door. If you need anything, just call us." With that, they were about to leave. Zhang Xiaohua's heart skipped a beat. She immediately called out to Lu Chaoxian and said, "Senior brother Lu, I have something to ask in private." Seeing this, Lu Chaoxian waved his hand and dismissed the other 7. He asked, "Junior brother Ren, what's the matter? Feel free to say it. I will tell you everything I know." Zhang Xiaohua shook her head and said, "I don't know what's going on either. When I saw Headmaster Chun and Wu Dalong today, I felt that their expressions and words were abnormal. I don't know what's going on." Lu Chaoxian was taken aback. He shook his head and said, "We just came back not long ago. We did not hear anything special." Then he thought for a while and said, "Since Junior brother feels that something is wrong, then I will go and ask others to see if there is anything unusual." "All right." Zhang Xiaohua nodded and said, "Be careful. Don't tell them that I want to ask." "Yes, I know. Junior brother, you should rest early. We'll have people standing guard outside. If Junior brother feels uncomfortable, you can call us immediately." Zhang Xiaohua nodded and expressed her thanks. After Lu Chaoxian left, Zhang Xiaohua slowly stood up and released her divine sense. Indeed, in front of the hut, Lu Chaoxian was discussing with Senior Brother Wang about how to stand guard at night. Sigh. Zhang Xiaohua sighed. After all, they had good intentions. How could she refuse? If not, Lu Chaoxian and the others would feel guilty for the rest of their lives. Then she spat out a mouthful of saliva and said self-mockingly, "I bit my tongue and only managed to force out such a small amount of blood. It doesn't feel good to pretend to be injured." Zhang Xiaohua's injuries from last night had mostly healed in one night. Although she had been riding on a horse for the whole morning, her injuries did not worsen. In the afternoon, from White Mountain Peak to Heaven Eye Peak, the injuries in her meridians had been constantly mended. Now that she checked carefully, most of them had already healed. If she did not pretend, how could she still look like she was seriously injured? Although she was on Heaven Eye Peak, Zhang Xiaohua did not dare to be careless. She still set up a restriction. Then she took out her vitality stones and began to practice the Carefree Heart Sutra. At midnight, the endless starlight enveloped Zhang Xiaohua. The starlight flowed into her meridians and gradually mended the damaged areas. When she woke up the next day, Zhang Xiaohua did a quick check. She was dumbfounded. Am I not a human-shaped Yuandan pill? I did not take any pills at all. My meridians healed on their own. My luck is really good. I don't know how many pills I can save in the future. Zhang Xiaohua was immensely pleased with herself. Actually, Zhang Xiaohua's meridians had been tempered by the starlight and absorbed by the starlight at night. Her self-healing ability was naturally strong. But if she did as Zhang Xiaohua thought and did not take any pills in the future, that would be unrealistic. After all, the internal injuries she had now were only caused by her forceful use of her vital energy. It was not serious. It was just that she had not calmed her heart and wanted to drag her injuries along the way. After a night of hard practice, her injuries would naturally be mostly healed. Her plan of lying in bed, lying on the praying mat for a few months would be ruined. Thinking of how to hide from Heaven Eye Peak in the future, Zhang Xiaohua walked out of the small house. The moment she opened the door, she saw Senior Brother Wang lying in front of her door alone. Zhang Xiaohua was stunned. Was this how they took care of her? If she did not know that they were sincere, Zhang Xiaohua would have thought that they were sent by Chan Fengxiao and the rest to keep an eye on her. Zhang Xiaohua squatted down and pushed Senior Brother Wang. Senior Brother Wang turned over and clicked his tongue. "Don't push me. Come one by one. There's a lot of cold light grass. There's enough to pick. OMG, Zhang Xiaohua almost fell to the ground. This Senior Brother Wang was truly an outstanding disciple of their grass division. Even in his dreams, he never forgot his duty. Thus, he had no choice but to continue pushing him. Senior Brother Wang, hurry up and get up. There's a 200-year-old ice soul grass there. Up 200-year-old ice soul grass. Where is it? Where is it?" Senior Brother Wang jumped up from the ground like a carp. His eyes were hazy, but he was full of energy. Zhang Xiaohua patted his shoulder and said, "Senior Brother Wang, it is me." "It is you?" Senior Brother Wang opened his eyes and saw Zhang Xiaohua in front of him. He scratched his head in embarrassment and said, "Junior Brother Run, I am sorry. These days, I have been dreaming of picking herbs with my fellow disciples in the strange birch forest. Zhang Xiaohua's heart ached for no reason. She said sadly, "Alas, it is all in the past. Let it remain in our memories. After all, we still have to continue living." "Yes, I know." Junior brother Ren, Headmaster Chen, also said this. Alas, in fact, in the early years, every time there was a disciple who could not come back from the Valley Orchid Evening refinement, I also advised others. But when it was my turn to let go, it was not a matter of words. Zhang Xiaowan nodded in agreement. Senior brother Wang smiled and said, "Junior brother Ren, you woke up so early. Could it be that your injuries have recovered?" "You're right," Zhang Xiaohua thought to herself. But she said, "It is nothing. I'm just used to waking up early. Going out for a walk is also good for my recovery." "That's right. I will accompany you for a walk," Junior brother Wang said, and was about to help Zhang Xiaohua up. Zhang Xiaohua hurriedly said, "Senior brother Wang, I am not injured to the point where I cannot walk. If you want to accompany me, you could just walk by my side." She slowly walked toward a secluded place. Yes, it was really slow, as if she was injured. Senior brother Wang saw this and smiled bitterly. He slowly followed behind her. The sun had just shone on Tianmu Peak. The entire morning was no different from usual. However, Zhang Xiaohua felt extremely relaxed. She no longer felt as heavy as when she woke up in the morning. It was probably because she had found her second brother. She felt as if a heavy burden had been lifted off her shoulders. While walking, she heard hurried footsteps behind her. Then, she heard someone calling out, "Junior brother Ren, why are you up so early? You are seriously injured. Why aren't you resting?" Zhang Xiaohua knew that Lu Chaoxian was coming over. Sure enough, when she turned around, she saw Lu Chaoxian walking over angrily. Lu Chaoxian was still forcing a smile on his face. When Zhang Xiaohua saw this, his heart skipped a beat. Could it be that something had happened? She smiled and said, "Senior brother Lu has always been a late riser. I didn't expect you to wake up today. I would like to sleep more, but junior brother gave me a mission yesterday. If I don't complete it, how can I sleep well?" Zhang Xiaohua nodded and said, "So fast? Then I will have to trouble senior brother." Senior brother Wang heard their conversation and knew that something had happened. He smiled and said, "I didn't sleep well last night. I will let senior brother Lu accompany me. I will come back in the afternoon." After saying that, he cupped his fists and left. When senior brother Wang was far away, Zhang Xiaohua said, "I thought it would be difficult to find out. Senior brother managed to find out in just one night. Besides, it's not a big deal. Everyone on Tianmu Peak knows about it, so I didn't have to spend much effort to find out." Zhang Xiaohua was very curious and asked, "Then what happened?" Lu Chaoxian looked at Zhang Xiaohua and hesitated for a moment before saying, "It's simple. When junior brother Ren left, didn't he leave your mount on Tianmu Peak?" "Yes. That mount is called Huan Huan." "What about it?" "Huan Huan? Huan Huan secretly ate the herbs planted on Tianmu Peak, and the disciples of Pill Expansion Hall found out. Bai Yefeng sent people to capture Huan Huan and bring her back to Bai Yefeng Peak." "What?" Zhang Xiaohua felt incredulous. What was going on? Not to mention whether Huan Huan had secretly eaten the herbs. Even if she had, there was no need for Bai Yefeng's men to catch her. "What about Bai Huan? Before I left, I entrusted Huan Huan to him." Chapter 693. Junior brother Bai, of course, was also caught by the law enforcement disciples of Baiyu Peak. OMG, Zhang Xiaohua didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Previously, when he was on Tianmu Peak, he had always casually tossed the David's deer to the side. He hadn't paid attention to whether it had eaten any herbs or not. But now that he thought about it, he hadn't heard the disciples in charge of looking after the herbs for a few months, so this shouldn't have happened. And even if Huan Huan had eaten the herbs, no one had said anything about it for several months. How could it have been discovered in the few days she went to the trial? Moreover, it was discovered by the disciples of Baiyu Peak. The most ridiculous thing was, what did this have to do with Bai Huan? She had entrusted the odd beast and Bai Huan with it privately, and no one knew about it. Oh, if there was anyone who knew, it would be the great guardian deity Zhou Shuming. This, even if it was entrusted, the odd beast was still Zhang Xiaohua's. If it had eaten the herbs, it would be Zhang Xiaohua's responsibility. It had nothing to do with Bai Huan. Since when had the cult of fragrance been so strict? Suddenly, Vice Leader Su's figure appeared in Zhang Xiaohua's mind, and then the dungeon on Bayou Peak. Could it be this guy's doing? Zhang Xiaohua muttered, "It doesn't make sense. It's just a few dozen taels of gold. Is it worth it?" Seeing Zhang Xiaohua's uncertain expression, Lu Chaoxian quickly added, "But there's good news. Junior Brother Ren's mount is very alert. On the way to Bayou Peak, it found an opportunity to slip away. Hee, there's no trace of it until now." Is that so? Huan's legs are really not ordinary. Hearing that Huan had escaped, Zhang Xiaohua was delighted. The cult of fragrance was lush with vegetation, and there weren't any fierce beasts. It was enough for Huan to survive. When did this happen? Zhang Xiaohua asked again. It was the second day after we entered the valley. I heard from a junior brothers that a brother from Bai Yefeng came to Tianmu Peak for some matters. He happened to see Huan nibbling on herbs, so he told Vice Hall Master Su. After Vice Hall Master Su heard this, he flew into a rage. He said that the disciples of the Pill Opening Hall risked their lives to gather herbs in the strange birch forest, and the Tianmu Peak behind them actually allowed livestock to eat the herbs. They must be severely punished, so Zhang Xiaohua smiled and waved her hand. So that's how it is. I was wondering why Headmaster Chen's expression was so bad. It turns out that you were afraid that I would overthink. Alas, it's nothing. Deputy Hall Master Su's law enforcement is just right. What can I say? Oh, Junior Brother Run, that's a good idea. It's just that the brothers feel that it's a little too heavy. Zhang Xiaohua didn't say anything, and then another stream of blood flowed out from the corner of her mouth. Junior Brethren, alas, it's okay. This internal injury can't be healed in a short period of time. I can't move more even if I want to. Let's go, Senior Brother Lu. I'd better stay in the house. Junior Brother Run is right. Before you vomit blood, it's better to stay in the house. As he spoke, Lu Chaoxian reached out to support Zhang Xiaohua as they slowly walked back to the house. Zhang Xiaohua looked too weak to stand up to a gust of wind. Not far from Zhang Xiaohua's house, in a loft, a pair of eyes cautiously stared at Zhang Xiaohua in her house. Zhang Xiaohua stayed in the house the whole day. She only showed her face outside in the afternoon and evening. Her face was still pale, as if her injuries hadn't improved at all. Not long after, the sky darkened. Zhang Xiaohua whispered, "Senior Brother Lu, I need to go back and treat my injuries. If you don't have my orders, it's better not to come in. Otherwise, you'll easily suffer from qi deviation." Lu Chaoxian nodded and said, "Junior Brother Run, don't worry about this. After following Junior Brother for so long, I don't know about other things, but I have a deep understanding of this point." Then he quietly walked out. As expected, there wasn't a trace of sound under his feet. Zhang Xiaohua, who was behind him, had already burst out laughing. It wasn't until Lu Chaoxian closed the door that she couldn't hold it in anymore and laughed out loud. After laughing happily, Zhang Xiaohua closed his mouth and a cold smile appeared at the corner of his mouth. He formed a seal with his hand and immediately disappeared from the room, directly escaping from a small house. When she poked her head out from the darkness and looked at the loft in the distance, she snorted. Although her divine sense couldn't recover, it was more sensitive than before. Although she didn't see anyone's face in the loft, Zhang Xiaohua knew that there was definitely someone observing her. If there wasn't a guilty conscience, what better explanation could there be? Zhang Xiaohua directly flew out of Tianmu Peak and came out from the other side of the mountain. After carefully identifying the direction, he leaped up and followed the path that the Pill Sprouting Hall senior apprentice brother had led him the other day. He flew in the direction of the wind. In the time it took to eat 2 meals, Bayou Peak could be seen in the distance. Zhang Xiaohua didn't dare to be careless. She lowered her altitude and only flew in the forest. When she got close to Bayou Peak, she immediately burrowed into the ground and without any hesitation, she headed towards the peak. The peak of Bayou Peak was as quiet as before. Only the sound of leaves and herbs rustling in the wind could be heard. At this time, The moon had yet to rise, and there were only some faint lights above the prison. It was the best time to travel at night. Zhang Xiaohua flew to the left side of the prison. She first poked her head out to take a closer look. She listened carefully to the movements around her and entered the prison with familiarity. This trip to the dungeon was different from the last time. That time, it was during the day, and the dungeon was very quiet. There was no sound, and Zhang Xiaohua only took a rough look before leaving quickly. This time, just as she emerged from the corner of a prison cell, she heard a heart-wrenching scream, which gave Zhang Xiaohua fright. Fortunately, this prison cell was empty and there were no living things. Zhang Xiaohua didn't dare to be negligent. She released her divine sense. Outside the prison cell, there were a few burly disciples. They should be law enforcement disciples. In their hands, there were some torture instruments that Zhang Xiaohua couldn't understand. Occasionally, there were a few naked men being dragged or pulled by law enforcement disciples. Those men were either badly mutilated or on the verge of death. They all looked like they had been punished. Could it be that there are so many disciples in pill-expanding hall who have committed crimes? Zhang Xiaohua was a little speechless. At this time, Zhang Xiaohua's divine sense was limited. She could only rely on the memory of the last time she came. She went from room to room, trying to find traces of Bai Huan. But after searching almost everywhere, she didn't find any trace of her. Could it be that I was wrong? A trace of guilt appeared in Zhang Xiaohua's heart. Maybe I wronged a good person. Maybe Bai Huan was just reprimanded. Thinking of this, Zhang Xiaohua felt relieved and wanted to escape from the dungeon. But at this time, two disciples walked over her head. One of them chuckled and said, "Junior fellow apprentice Meng is living a good life with Deputy Home Master Su. Previously, he always came at night, but now there is no trace of him." When the other person heard this, he said mysteriously, "Forget it. Junior brother Meng has been here for a long time, but he's just serving a disciple in a small room. It's been many days, but he can't find what he wants no matter what. I saw him storming and angrily just now. I guess today is the last day. I don't usually see him lose his composure like this." Junior fellow apprentice Meng is an expert at extorting confessions by torture. Whoever is in his hands will have to give in. Which family's child made a mistake? I don't know where, but I heard from junior fellow apprentice Meng that the boy insisted that he would not say anything even if he was beaten to death. He would not say anything even if he was beaten to death. These words struck Zhang Xiaohua's mind like lightning. This seemed to be the witty word she said when she came down from Tianmu Peak and entrusted the four odd beasts to Bai Huan. This must be Bai Huan. Just as she was thinking, she saw a reckless man with bulging muscles in a remote corner. His upper body was bare, and his face was gloomy, as if someone owed him a caddy of black beans money. With a loud bang, he closed a small iron door and locked it with a thick chain. He strode over. Seeing this, the two of them smiled and said, "Junior fellow apprentice Meng, did it not go well?" "Oomph." Junior fellow apprentice Meng snorted and did not say much. He walked straight through the two of them. The two of them did not dare to ignore him and quickly moved to the side, leaving a small gap in the corridor. After senior fellow apprentice Meng walked past, the two of them looked at the back view of the person who was taller than them. They wanted to spit, but did not dare to. They only gritted their teeth and said softly, "Let's go and find a little lamb to vent our anger." As they spoke, they randomly picked a cell and entered it. Not long after, a series of screams rang out. Zhang Xiaohua watched from the side with a cold light in her eyes. When the three of them were far away and the other law enforcement disciples were not around, she quietly entered the cell that junior fellow apprentice Meng had just walked out of. As soon as he emerged from the ground, Zhang Xiaohua couldn't help but suck in a breath of cold air. The entire room was filled with the stench of blood. Although he couldn't see clearly, with his divine sense, he could see that the person in front of him was hung on a tall rack. His hands were tied up by thick iron chains, and his feet were nailed to the nails at the bottom of the rack. This person's hair was disheveled and covered his face. His chest was no longer moving up and down. He must have died. Zhang Xiaohua took a deep breath and took out the luminous pearl from her arms. Under the faint brilliance, she walked towards the person. Before she got close, she saw that the person was naked. Countless bloodstains covered his entire body and had long dried up. There were still many whip marks on his upper body, but there was not much blood. It was the result of a recent whipping. Zhang Xiaohua walked to the front and carefully lifted the hair on the person's face. He had chanted Ba countless times in his heart, praying that this person was not Bai Huan. But when he saw the bloodless face, he still stood there in a daze. If this was not Bai Huan, who else could it be? For a moment, since Zhang Xiaohua saw Bai Huan that evening, all the details appeared in her mind. This was just a submissive and cautious disciple. Perhaps she would bully other disciples and take advantage of them a little, but she had never done anything wrong. How could she end up like this? Chapter 694. Zhang Xiaohua was angry. He thought about his impression of Bai Huan from the beginning to the end. He really didn't think that Bai Huan could make him feel disgusted or a little disgusted. Even when he first met Bai Huan's extortion was a little narrow-minded. Compared to Brother Ma, who only knew how to bully newcomers, and Cheng Shi, who took things by force, he was many times better. Bai Huan was so careful to please Chen Fengxiao, but didn't dare to offend Zhang Xiaohua. Bai Huan stood outside the cave in Zhang Xiaohua's divine awareness and wanted to call Zhang Xiaohua, but was afraid to disturb Zhang Xiaohua's practice. Bai Huan carefully took out the herbs Zhang Xiaohua got from the orchid evening refinement and nervously exchanged them for elixirs. What hurt Zhang Xiaohua the most was that when he finally entrusted Huan to Bai Huan patted his chest indifferently and agreed. Then, he thought of the joke he said to Bai Huan, "I won't tell you even if you beat me to death." Now, those words had become reality. Bai Huan patted his chest and promised Zhang Xiaohua. Now, his chest was full of whip marks. What about the promise he made to Bai Huan? Looking at Bai Huan's miserable condition, Zhang Xiaohua's heart was infinitely desolate. Perhaps this was the end of a small character. If Zhang Xiaohua didn't find him here, he would be thrown somewhere tomorrow and never be found again. Even if Zhang Xiaohua wanted to fulfill his promise, he couldn't. Thinking of this, Zhang Xiaohua involuntarily took out a bottle of blood replenishing elixirs and transferred a wisp of genuine qi directly into Bai Huan's meridians toward his heart. After a while, Bai Huan's eyes moved slightly, and then there was some movement. He also said something with difficulty. Zhang Xiaohua carefully pricked up his ears and could hear clearly, "I really don't know anything." He only said to hand Huan to me to raise him, even if he beat to death he won't tell. "It's just a joke." Zhang Xiaohua's heart ached. She whispered, "Senior Marshal Brother Bai, it's me. I'm back." After a while, Bai Huan opened her eyes with great difficulty. Under the dim brilliance of the luminous pearl, she identified Zhang Xiaohua for a long time. Immediately, her eyes flashed with surprise. She forced herself to be alert and raised her voice. "Junior, brother, Ren, you quickly report. Vice, Hall, Master, I really didn't take your bag. I really..." Before he could finish his sentence, he swallowed his words and could no longer speak. His eyes did not move, and his body gradually turned cold. In fact, when Junior Marshal Brother Meng walked out, Bai Huan had already stopped breathing. Zhang Xiaohua transferred her vital energy into Bai Huan's heart meridian, but it could only last for a moment. After nearly 20 days of torture, Bai Huan was like a lamp that had run out of oil. She could no longer hold on. Even if Zhang Xiaohua took out all the elixirs in her arms, she could not save Bai Huan's life for even a moment. Seeing Bai Huan stop breathing in front of her, Zhang Xiaohua had an indescribable feeling in her heart. "I didn't kill Boren, but Boren died because of me." This kind of guilt was something Zhang Xiaohua had never felt before. Zhang Xiaohua put away the luminous pearl and the blood-replenishing elixir. She stood quietly in the darkness. After a long while, she said, "Senior Marshal Brother Bai, I will keep this blood-replenishing elixir for you. When you are buried, I will find an opportunity to bring your body out and bury it with you. In addition, although I didn't mean it, you died because of me. I will definitely avenge you. I know you were timid when you were alive and might not dare to let me avenge you. But today, you have become a ghost. I hope you can be bolder and become a malicious ghost. Just watch from the heavens. I'm going to find the people who killed you and make them pay with their lives. Bai Huan's body was quietly hanging there, motionless. Zhang Xiaohua immediately marked the corpse with her divine sense. Then, she glanced at it and made a gesture. She disappeared into the darkness. After leaving the dungeon, Zhang Xiaohua suddenly thought that she didn't know where Vice Hall Master Su was resting. Now that it was late, it wouldn't be easy to find him. If she asked a disciple, wouldn't it be easy to find him? At this time, Zhang Xiaohua suddenly thought of Junior Marshal Brother Meng, who went out earlier. That guy didn't get anything from Bai Huan and even kill Bai Huan. He must be reporting to Vice Hall Master Su. If she went with him, she would definitely be able to find him. However, she didn't think so much and stayed in the dungeon for a long time. She didn't know if she could catch up with him. After thinking, Zhang Xiaohua immediately rode the wind and went straight to the mountainside. Fortunately, Zhang Xiaohua's speed was extremely fast. When she reached the mountainside, she saw a valiant figure in front of her turning around the screen wall. Fortunately, Zhang Xiaohua was secretly happy. Then, she went underground and followed Junior Marshal Brother Meng to an extremely secluded small courtyard. Junior Marshal Brother Meng knocked on the wooden door in front of the courtyard. It seemed to be a rhythmic sound. Then a voice came from inside. "Who is it?" Junior Marshal Brother Meng said respectfully, "Vice Hall Master Su. It's me." "Oh, Meng Fei, come in quickly." Meng Fei opened the courtyard door and walked into the hall lightly. However, when he entered the room, he was stunned. In the hall, besides Vice Hall Master Su, there was also a teenager standing next to him. However, Meng Fei was only slightly stunned. Then, he cupped his hands and said, "Hall Master." He hesitated for a moment and said, "I didn't do what Hall Master asked me to do." He glanced at the child from the corner of his eyes. Vice Hall Master Su looked at Meng Fei's cautiousness and was very satisfied. He nodded and said, "It's okay. This child was sent here this year. There's no need to hide this matter from him." "Oh." Meng Fei turned to look at the child. The child cupped his hands and said, "Junior Marshal Brother Chong greets you." "Chong?" Meng Fei was taken aback. He smiled and said, "Junior Marshal Brother, your name is really wonderful." "Not bad. Haha, my name is Meng Fei. In the future, when you're at the White Mountain Peak, just say my name. No one will dare to bully you." "Yes, Senior Marshal Brother." Chong smiled and said, "However, I've never provoked anyone. It's better not to say your name." Meng Fei nodded and said, "Not bad. Heroes indeed come from youth. It seems that the gang has put in a lot of effort to send you here." Vice Hall Master Su was also happy to hear this. He said, "Chong is a good child. I also searched for a long time before I found him. I never thought that the gang would start with the most difficult Rejuvenation Valley." "Rejuvenation Valley?" Meng Fei frowned and said, "Hall Master Su, isn't that guy also from Rejuvenation Valley?" That's right. You still haven't found out what you were doing?" "Yes, the guy insisted that he didn't know anything. Moreover, he only said that he wouldn't say anything even if he was beaten to death. It's very different from his usual behavior. Sigh, I guess I've really wronged him. However, since he's already been captured, he definitely won't be released. Moreover, that guy actually came out of the Yulon Grand Canyon alive. It's useless to keep Bai Huan alive. It's better to get rid of him quickly. Hall Master Su already told me this yesterday, so today was the last time. Seeing that I couldn't get anything out of him, I've already gotten rid of him. You've done well. Now that the dead tell no tales, Ren Xiaoyao wouldn't rush to the White Mountain Peak for a mount." "Ha. Chong immediately said, "Hall Master Su's eyes are as sharp as torches. Even when I followed Ren Xiaoyao all the way here, I didn't see that he was a pawn of the Tenryu sect. If he could be easily seen through by you, how could he be easily dispatched by the Tenryu sect? If I hadn't had a flash of inspiration, I definitely wouldn't have been able to see through him either." "Hall Master Su is wise," Chong said with a charming smile. "Hall Master Su, please point me in the right direction and let me improve." Vice Hall Master Su seemed to be very proud of himself. He said with a smile, "Actually, it's quite simple. The cult of fragrance has been hiding here for thousands of years, and the Tenryu sect has long since made their move. We haven't been able to make use of the Rejuvenation Valley, so there's an 80 to 90% chance that the Tenryu sect is controlling it. Moreover, Ren Xiaoyao's origins are very strange. He's already so old, yet he was still sent here. Although the reason is very good, it could be explained clearly. Anyone with a discerning eye can see that there's a problem. After a careful investigation, they'll feel that the explanation makes sense. Thus, they'll take it as a matter of course. This is the saying, the real is fake, and the fake is real. However, if you think about it again, what's real is real, and what's fake is fake. Chang and Meng Fei both had a look of sudden realization. They both raised their thumbs and said, Hall Master Su are really smart. We're proud to have such a wise and far-sighted leader like you. Vice Hall Master Su stroked his beard and smiled proudly. He said, all of this is just a guess. It can't be confirmed. Only when we find Ren Xiaoyao's package and take the things inside can we be sure. That's true. However, Hall Master Su, it's strange. Ren Xiaoyao clearly didn't take anything with him when he left. Why can't we find his package? I've personally searched the caves, huts, and even the surrounding areas. I don't know where he's hiding. At this moment, a large package was thrown in from outside the door. A voice also sounded. Are you looking for this package? Who is it? Vice Hall Master Su immediately stood up from his chair and shouted angrily. This is an important place in the hall. Who dares to trespass? Chang was somewhat afraid. He trembled and shouted, Is it little uncle? With a hearty laugh, Zhang Xiaohua floated in and said, Don't call me little uncle. This Xiaoxia can't afford it. Ren Xiaoyao, it's really you. Meng Fei didn't recognize Zhang Xiaohua. However, when he heard Chang and Vice Hall Master Su's words, his face lit up with joy. He said, You didn't take the path of the sun, but you barged into the gates of hell. It's time for me to capture you. As he spoke, Meng Fei quickly stepped forward and grabbed Zhang Xiaohua's face. Chapter 695. Seeing Meng Fei walk forward, Vice Hall Master Su, who was sitting behind him, watched quietly. He did not stop him or say anything. However, his gaze was fixed on Zhang Xiaohua as if he was deep in thought. It was said that an ordinary disciple of the grass division of Tianmu Peak, who was said to have been seriously injured, could still rush to Baiyue Peak and silently enter this secret courtyard. Even Vice Hall Master Su himself did not notice. Can this still be what I thought it was? Vice Hall Master Su seemed to understand that he might have underestimated the thin and tall young man in front of him. How could a person who could escape from the Beast Tide in Yulon Grand Canyon be a simple person? Perhaps Lu Lihong did not see the Beast Tide. However, Vice Hall Master Su still sat calmly. The more outstanding Zhang Xiaohua's performance was, the more it proved that his guess was correct. Then, the value of finding Zhang Xiaohua would be greater. As for Vice Hall Master Su's confidence, was there any need to say it? He just watched quietly, without even a frown on his face. Seeing Zhang Xiaohua come in, Qi Chang panicked at first, but when Meng Fei rushed forward, his face calmed down slightly. Then, he stole a glance at Vice Hall Master Su's calm face. This guy was confident. When he saw Meng Fei's big fist smashing toward Zhang Xiaohua, his eyes unconsciously flashed with excitement. Zhang Xiaohua was also anxious. Seeing Meng Fei's fist smashing towards her, she did not dodge. Instead, she stared at Meng Fei's ferocious face and said word by word, You killed Bai Huan, so I will kill you too. Meng Fei was slightly startled. It seemed that he did not expect Zhang Xiaohua to know that Bai Huan was killed by him. However, there was a trace of mockery in his eyes. His right fist was less than half an inch away from Zhang Xiaohua's head. At this time, Meng Fei's right foot moved again. He lifted it and kicked towards Zhang Xiaohua's left side. He must have calculated that Zhang Xiaohua would dodge to the left side. With his swish sound, at the last moment when Meng Fei's fist was about to hit her head, Zhang Xiaohua only raised her right hand and grabbed his wrist at lightning speed. She did not give Meng Fei any time to react at all. Then, she squatted slightly, raised her left fist, and simply punched towards Meng Fei's chest. Meng Fei was shocked by Zhang Xiaohua's lightning-fast speed. He immediately tried to pull back, but unexpectedly, no matter how hard he tried, his hands seemed to be cast by iron and could not move an inch. Meng Fei was shocked. Seeing that his right leg had missed, he borrowed the force of his fist to lift Zhang Xiaohua's waist from the side. At the same time, he raised his other fist to meet Zhang Xiaohua's fist. At the same time, he used the force that Zhang Xiaohua locked his fist to force Zhang Xiaohua to let go. Unfortunately, Zhang Xiaohua acted as if she did not see it. Her fist was still moving forward at a steady pace. Meng Fei was very puzzled. Just as he was wondering if there was something fishy going on, the two fists had already collided. At the moment before contact, Zhang Xiaohua suddenly accelerated. Bang! Following that, there was a blood-curdling scream. Meng Fei's fist was already dripping with blood. The eerie white finger bones were already exposed. There were even a few bones protruding from the joints of his arm. Following that, there were a few crispy cracking sounds. Meng Fei once again let out a blood-curdling scream. Zhang Xiaohua's right hand exerted force and broke the wrist in her hand. Following that, like breaking a withered tree trunk, she broke Meng Fei's left arm into several pieces. A wave of pain surged up to his head. Even Meng Fei, who claimed to be a tough guy, felt his head sink and was about to faint. However, Zhang Xiaohua extended her left hand and tapped on one of Meng Fei's acupoints. She channeled a strand of true qi into Meng Fei's body to protect his heart meridian and brain. Meng Fei immediately regained consciousness. That heart-wrenching pain immediately emerged. Following that, Zhang Xiaohua did not hesitate. Her right fist extended continuously. Kacha! Kacha! Sound were heard continuously. Meng Fei's blood-curdling screams were also incessant. In just a few breaths, Zhang Xiaohua had broken hundreds of bones in Meng Fei's body from the middle. Alas, Zhang Xiaohua practiced the Big Dipper magical fist every day and tempered the bones in her entire body. Her proficiency with the bones was something that ordinary people could not compare to. At this moment, Meng Fei had suddenly become a puddle of mud. However, his throat was grabbed by Zhang Xiaohua's left hand. He still stood there straight like a puppet. The pain in his entire body surged up to Meng Fei's head like a tide. He had never felt that fainting or dying immediately would be an extremely happy thing. He looked at Zhang Xiaohua, who had a somewhat excited face. He muttered and wanted to say something, but Zhang Xiaohua's left hand was tightly gripping his throat. He could not say a single word clearly and could only howl. Looking at Meng Fei's pain, Zhang Xiaohua felt a little relieved in her heart. She sneered and said, "When you were torturing Bai Huan, did you feel very good in your heart? Did you never think that you would be treated like this one day?" Although there was fear in Meng Fei's bloodshot eyes, they also emitted a beast-like cold light from time to time. As he screamed, he also roared. His limbs were suspended in the air, and he occasionally struck forward, as if he was unwilling to give up. Seeing this, Zhang Xiaohua could not be bothered with him. She only said, "It's not that I don't want to avenge you, but it's not time yet." Then, she exerted force with her left hand. With a final crack, Meng Fei's neck was crushed. A stream of dirty blood flowed out from the corner of Meng Fei's mouth. Zhang Xiaohua casually shook her hand and threw Meng Fei's corpse to the ground. Zhang Xiaohua killed Meng Fei in less than 5 minutes, especially when she grabbed Meng Fei's left hand and used her fist to crush Meng Fei's fist. Meng Fei's body really blocked Deputy Hall Master Su's line of sight. When Meng Fei screamed, Deputy Hall Master Su was first startled. Then, he wanted to get up. However, after hearing Meng Fei's screams, Deputy Hall Master Su sat down calmly. However, he was puzzled as he looked at the empty door. Now that they saw Zhang Xiaohua easily kill Meng Fei, their reactions were completely different. Meng Fei's face was ashen, and she muttered something. From the shape of her mouth, it could be seen that she was muttering something along the lines of "little uncle." Deputy Hall Master Su stretched out his hands and clapped lightly. He smiled and said, Ren Xiaoxia is indeed brave and fierce. Meng Fei is also considered an expert, but he couldn't even last 2 moves in front of you. AI, the Tenryu sect, is indeed full of talented people. Xiaoxia is so young and has such profound martial arts. I wonder which Heavenly King's subordinate is? Seeing Deputy Hall Master Su so calm, Zhang Xiaohua was slightly taken aback. She sneered and said, "I've already heard your conversation. I'm just curious. Why are you so sure that I'm from the Tenryu sect?" Deputy Hall Master Su smiled and said, "Why? Are you going to admit it?" Zhang Xiaohua shook her head and said, "No, I've never said that I'm for the Tenryu sect. Furthermore, I'm not from the Tenryu sect at all. You're still so insistent even at this time. It's really hard on you." Deputy Hall Master Su, you seem to be very calm. You seem to have absolute confidence. Ren Xiaoxia must be joking. After all, this is my territory. Shouldn't you be the one who's not calm? Zhang Xiaohua nodded and said with a smile, "Deputy Hall Master Su is right. However, when I wring your head off, you won't be like this anymore." Hee hee, young people are really hot-tempered. What era are we in now? Why are you still talking about fighting and killing? Your style is already outdated. Nowadays, it's mainly about talking. Peace, win-win, multi-party cooperation, these are the mainstream. Come, sit down. Let's talk peacefully. We're all in favor of a discussion that's based on the interests of both our factions. Then Deputy Hall Master Su, which sect are you from? When Ren Xiaoxia came to the incense cult, didn't your teacher tell you? Deputy Hall Master Su's face was unfathomable. Zhang Xiaohua still smiled and said, "I've already told you clearly that I'm not from the Tenryu sect. Why will my teacher come back and tell me?" Deputy Hall Master Su also smiled and said, "It doesn't matter if you're not from the Tenryu sect. Anyway, you've infiltrated the incense cult to deal with them. This is the same goal as us. Since we have the same goal, we're the enemy of the enemy. Isn't that the premise of cooperation?" "Ha ha." Zhang Xiaohua laughed and said, "Deputy Hall Master Su, you've already tried to kill Run one after another. At this time, you're still talking about cooperation? I feel that it's ridiculous. Ren Xiaoxia is still young. When he's my age, perhaps he'll know that there's nothing in this world that can't be discussed. Even life is the same. Ha ha. Deputy Hall Master Su, I'm afraid you won't be able to wait until then." Zhang Xiaohua shook his head and said, "If Ren understands Deputy Hall Master Su's meaning 30 years from now, then Ren will go to Deputy Hall Master Su's grave and burn incense to inform you. And the premise is that Ren still remembers Deputy Hall Master Su." Deputy Hall Master Su was still as calm as Mount Tai. Zhang Xiaohua saw this and mocked. "Deputy Hall Master Su, don't tell me you're waiting for reinforcements?" Raising his eyebrows, Deputy Hall Master Su said proudly, "Although this old man is old, I'm still more than enough to deal with a brat like you. Why should I wait for others to help?" However, Deputy Hall Master Su changed the topic and said strangely, "You killed Meng Fei so violently." Meng Fei's screams resounded through the night sky. You're actually not worried that other disciples will come?" Zhang Xiaohua said, "Haha, I thought Deputy Hall Master Su was very calm. It seems that you're just SOSO. However, let me tell you something. Even if you shout until the heavens break, the heavens will not answer you." Haha. Vice Hall Master Su also raised his head and laughed. Suddenly, from his seemingly casual movement, a black light silently shot towards Zhang Xiaohua's throat. This hidden weapon was truly strange. Not to mention that Vice Hall Master Su had assumed a negotiating posture and prioritized peace, and not to mention that the hidden weapon was silent. Vice Hall Master Su had even concealed it with a long laugh. However, the fact that Vice Hall Master Su had directly used such a despicable method was absolutely out of everyone's expectations. Even if he was strong, he only noticed the hidden weapon when it was 3 inches away from Zhang Xiaohua's throat. His eyes were already filled with surprise. Chapter 696. Although Vice Hall Master Su's little abacus rang loudly in his heart, in front of Zhang Xiaohua's powerful divine sense, it was useless. Zhang Xiaohua had already released his divine sense, fearing that Deputy Hall Master Su would do something. When he saw the black light, he recognized that it was a short arrow. There was a blue light on the tip of the arrow. It must have been coated with poison. Seeing that the poisonous arrow was close to him, Zhang Xiaohua didn't dare to be careless. He didn't use his hand to catch it. Instead, he lowered his body and tried to dodge it. But at that moment, the poisonous arrow's arrowhead let out a soft explosion. The entire arrowhead transformed into a cluster of short needles that shot out in all directions right next to Zhang Xiaohua's face. Ouch! Zhang Xiaohua was shocked. He thought that it was a poisonous arrow. He used his divine sense to look at it, but he didn't observe it carefully. It was too late for him to dodge it now. Zhang Xiaohua immediately lowered his head and raised his right arm to cover his head with the clothes on his arm. Just when Zhang Xiaohua was trying to dodge the poisonous needles, suddenly, a leg appeared in midair and kicked Zhang Xiaohua in the chest. Ouch! Zhang Xiaohua was shocked again. All his attention was on the poisonous needles. He didn't use his divine sense to check his surroundings. He didn't expect that when the poisonous needles exploded, Deputy Hall Master Su would fly up from his chair like a gust of wind and kick him in midair. There was a series of poochie sounds, accompanied by a puff sound. Zhang Xiaohua was kicked out of the door by Deputy Hall Master Su like a sandbag. Deputy Hall Master Su sneered. You're still wet behind the ears. You want to fight with me? Do you think, however, before Vice Hall Master Su could finish his sentence, Zhang Xiaohua's flying figure seemed to be blocked by something just as he was about to fly out of the door. It was as if he was caught in a fishing net. He only slowed down a little before he flew towards Vice Hall Master Su at the same speed. Vice Hall Master Su was taken aback. He raised his palm to strike Zhang Xiaohua's body, but before he could do so, a small fist appeared and met his palm head-on. Oof. Although Deputy Hall Master Su was surprised, he didn't care. He still hit his hand. In an instant, the palm and the fist collided. There was no sound, but Deputy Hall Master Su seemed to have been hit by a hammer. His body flew up and fell back. Zhang Xiaohua's retreating figure was immediately revealed on the spot. Zhang Xiaohua stood there steadily, but there was blood at the corner of his mouth. Zhang Xiaohua watched coldly as Vice Hall Leader Su's body was sent flying into the air and slowly fell back down. He then raised his arm and looked at the densely packed poison needles on his sleeve. He could not help but feel a lingering fear. Zhang Xiaohua's martial arts were high enough, but he was still inexperienced. He didn't expect Deputy Hall Master Su to have so many moves. If he wasn't wearing the robe of Venerable Fire Dragon, he would have been seriously injured by the poisonous needles. Even if he wasn't seriously injured, his face would be covered with scars. That would be worse than being seriously injured. Cough, cough. Zhang Xiaohua's internal injuries, which were almost healed, worsened. He coldly used the fingers of his left hand to carefully wipe away the blood at the corner of his mouth. He said, Vice Hall Master Su, good method. Well said. Deputy Hall Master Su stood up and asked with a surprised expression, Run Xiaoxia's internal strength is very good. At the very least, he is one of the best in the Tenryu sect's younger generation. Then he looked at the empty doorway and said, What did you do to my doorway? Zhang Xiaohua narrowed his eyes and laughed. Do you think I will tell you? As he spoke, he stretched out his hand and took out the chasing dream dagger. He quickly stepped forward and thrust the dagger at Vice Hall Master Su's throat. He really didn't want to waste his breath on this kind of person. Who was Deputy Hall Master Su? He was the Deputy Hall Master of the Pill Repository Hall and an inner disciple of the Lingering Fragrance Peak. He did not even draw the long sword at his waist. Instead, he faced Zhang Xiaohua's small sword with his bare hands. The two of them fought for the time it took to drink a cup of tea, and neither of them had the upper hand. Although Zhang Xiaohua's strength was great, Deputy Hall Master Su's internal strength was superb, and his moves were exquisite. Whenever he encountered a move that he couldn't defeat, he would be able to dissipate the force and even use it to counterattack. Even so, Deputy Hall Master Su was shocked. With this level of martial arts, even if there were 3 Lu Li Hong, he wouldn't be able to defeat Lu Li Hong, let alone kill him. Both of them became impatient and retreated half a step. Deputy Hall Master Su stretched out his hand and pulled out his sword. He circulated his internal energy, and an inch-long sword light flashed. Then, he used the splitting mountain technique and slashed towards Zhang Xiaohua's face. Zhang Xiaohua also made a hand sign and pointed his finger. The dagger seemed to be full of spirituality and flew out from his hand. It flew diagonally and stabbed towards Deputy Hall Master Su's neck. Flying sword. Deputy Hall Master Su was shocked. His sword trembled and the sword light disappeared. He didn't have time to hurt anyone, but quickly pulled his sword back and pointed at the dagger. Zhang Xiaohua wanted to test the waters and didn't dodge. With a kong sound, the two swords collided. Deputy Hall Master Su felt as if he was struck by lightning. His arm went soft, and he took half a step back. His face was pale. Chasing Dream was also hit and tumbled in the air. Zhang Xiaohua almost couldn't control it. Seeing that Zhang Xiaohua was a little flustered, Deputy Hall Master Su suppressed the fear in his heart and rushed forward. He pointed his sword at Zhang Xiaohua's heart. Zhang Xiaohua was shocked. She didn't have time to control Chasing Dream. She used the ethereal steps and cleverly dodged the sword. She flashed behind Deputy Hall Master Su and opened up a distance between them. She pointed her finger, and Chasing Dream rushed down again. This time, Zhang Xiaohua learned her lesson. She didn't rashly collide with Deputy Hall Master Su's sword. Instead, she focused on using the dream-weaving sword technique. She surrounded Deputy Hall Master Su and kept stabbing at his throat. It had to be said that Deputy Hall Master Su was very powerful. His martial arts were only a little weaker than the bronze-masked old man that Zhang Xiaohua had encountered previously. However, after that battle, Zhang Xiaohua's cultivation in the way of immortality had increased. Her divine sense had also improved by leaps and bounds. Even though her divine sense could only cover a radius of one zhang, her control over the flying sword had become more precise. In addition, she had obtained the complete set of the dream-weaving sword technique. She was like a tiger that had grown wings. It was impossible for Deputy Hall Master Su to use his hand or sword to hit Chasing Dream like the bronze-masked old man. After a few moves, Vice Hall Master Su had no choice but to place his sword in front of his throat in order to block Chasing Dream, who was about to stab him in the throat. As a result, although he managed to dodge Chasing Dream, the sword in his hand was cut in half by Chasing Dream. Deputy Hall Master Su was shocked. He jumped back a step. Seeing Chasing Dream turn around and stab at him again, he clenched his teeth and took out a short sword. It was the nameless sword that he had extorted from Yang Yao. He shook his hand and stabbed at Chasing Dream. How could Zhang Xiaohua let him stab her? She ordered Chasing Dream to turn around. Right at that moment, Vice Hall Master Su clenched his teeth. Then he bit the tip of his tongue, causing him to vomit a mouthful of blood. His face turned deathly pale, and the veins on his arms bulged. Even his eyes were bloodshot. Reverse blood corrosion essence. Zhang Xiaohua's heart skipped a beat. She had seen this scene before in the peach forest outside Sorrow City. She knew that this was an extreme technique that forcefully increased one's martial arts. As a result, she did not dare to be careless. She controlled Chasing Dream while thinking of a countermeasure. As expected, after Deputy Hall Master Su used the reverse blood corrosion essence technique, his internal energy had increased greatly. Even his movements had become much more agile. Chasing Dream was almost unable to lock onto his throat. As for the short sword in his hand, while blocking Chasing Dream, he could also stab at Zhang Xiaohua. What should I do now? Zhang Xiaohua was somewhat helpless. She had wanted to directly use the attack Jade Talisman. However, the flame in the Jade Talisman was incomparably fierce. If it hit Deputy Hall Master Su's body, there would be nothing left of him. However, Deputy Hall Master Su was the Deputy Hall Master of the Pill Repository Hall. He was not liked by Huan and Meng Fei. If he disappeared, then so be it. Only Sage Herb would have some thoughts. Well, if Bai Huan disappeared, then Sage Herb would not know at all. But what if Deputy Hall Master Su disappeared? The consequences would of course be 100 times more serious than being killed. Perhaps it would cause a huge uproar in the fragrance cult. As a foreign fake medicine boy, she would inevitably fall into the eyes of some people. However, if she was killed, a little medicine boy like her would not be considered at all. Of course, there would be a lot less danger. After thinking for a while, Zhang Xiaohua decided to use the dragon binding ring. Although the dragon binding ring consumed a lot of genuine qi, and the genuine qi in her meridians might not be enough. However, the situation was a little critical now. Zhang Xiaohua could not put away her initial plan of not using the dragon binding ring. After thinking about it, Zhang Xiaohua no longer hesitated. She reached out her hand and took out the jade bracelet from her bosom. She threw it into the air and cast a spell. The jade bracelet seemed to grow in the wind. It grew to about 4 feet and wrapped around Deputy Hall Master Su's body. This Deputy Hall Chief Su was even more panicked. He didn't even have time to say a word before he hurriedly fled. However, the hall was only so big. Although he was fast now, he could barely match Zhang Xiaohua's divine sense. After a few dodges, he was about to be caught by the dragon binding ring. Vice Hall Master Su stretched out his left hand and grabbed the jade pendant on his belt. He exerted force and crushed the jade pendant. Pah! A brown light shot out from his hand and instantly covered his entire body like a transparent cover. The dragon binding hoop had already landed on Vice Hall Master Su's head. However, Vice Hall Master Su was unharmed because of this transparent cover. Chapter 697. Seeing Vice Hall Master Su crush the jade pendant at his waist, Zhang Xiaohua knew that things were not going well. Needless to say, this was definitely the life-saving technique of the lingering Fragrance Peak disciples. It was also a defensive jade talisman left behind by the ancient immortal Tao. By the time the light shield rose, the dragon binding hoop was still wrapped around the light shield, unable to shrink it by even half an inch. Zhang Xiaohua tried a few more times, but the jinqi in his meridians was insufficient, so he gave up. At this time, inside the light barrier, Vice Hall Master Su's face was filled with astonishment as he shouted, "You? Just which heavenly king of the heavenly dragon sect are you? How? How can a disciple of the lower generation know this technique?" Zhang Xiaohua smiled wryly and said, "Do I look like a heavenly king? If I were a heavenly king, I would have sent my subordinates to kill you. Why would I do it myself?" But, Immortal Tao. Vice Leader Su's eyes lit up. He was even more surprised. Could it be that the Tenryu sect has found a way to revive the Immortal Tao? Revive the Immortal Tao? Zhang Xiaohua rubbed her chin and said, "Is the incense cult also looking for it?" "Of course," Vice Leader Su said casually. Then he realized he had misspoken and changed the topic. "You said you weren't from the Tenryu sect. In this big world, who knows about the Immortal Tao outside of the great sects? Not to mention the divine arts of the Immortal Tao." Then he said, "We're all from the great sects of the Immortal Tao. We're brothers and sisters. Besides, we're both going against the incense cult. Junior brother, can you let me go?" Zhang Xiaohua smiled. "Then tell me, which sect are you from?" "This." Vice Leader Su thought for a moment and said, "If I tell you, will you let me go?" Zhang Xiaohua said firmly, "Impossible. But I'll let you die a quick death, not like Meng Fei." "Humph," sneered Vice Hall Master Su. "Then why should I tell you? Besides, this shield is very strong. It can hold until tomorrow morning. When a disciple comes to report, let's see if you'll let me go or not. At that time, you won't need to let me go even if you want to. I'll go to Lingering Fragrance Peak and report this to the sect leader. I'll let the sect's consecrated elders capture you. Where you come from is none of my business. Even if you kill all the people of Lingering Fragrance Peak, I won't lift half a finger. However, you instructed people to kill me and Bai Huan. How can I let you go? Junior brother, I'm telling you that I'm to protect myself. It's our sect. To say, to promote the Tenryu to say, to make you to say the Tenryu sect." Then he licked his dry lips and said, "Bai Huan is just a little disciple of Qianmu Peak. I originally thought that he was like you, but I couldn't find anything after investigating. Anyway, Meng Fei has already been killed by you. This matter should be resolved. Zhang Xiaohua still shook her head. It's useless to say more. I'm not from the Tenryu sect. What you said is useless. I'll take your life as an explanation to senior brother Bai. You, Vice Leader Su was so angry that he laughed and said, I'd like to see what you can do to me. By the way, you said that the consecrated elders of Lingering Fragrance Peak also have celestial methods? Of course. Vice Leader Su knew he had made a slip of the tongue. He gnashed his teeth. This guy's words are too jumpy. I'll fall into his trap if I'm not careful. Then what kind of methods are they? Zhang Xiaohua asked again, but Vice Leader Su pretended not to hear her. Zhang Xiaohua smiled and said, Since you don't want to tell me, then don't blame me for ruthlessly destroying the grass. Vice Leader Su didn't understand at first, but when he understood the meaning of ruthlessly destroying the grass, his face turned ashen. He was also uneasy. He really didn't know what other methods Zhang Xiaohua would have. Zhang Xiaohua took out a light red jade talisman from her chest. She shook her hand and hit the brown light shield around Vice Leader Su. The light red flame slowly burned the light shield. When the flame was gone, only 20% of the light shield's brilliance had dimmed. Ha ha! Vice Leader Su's initial nervousness was instantly relieved. He laughed and said, Junior Brother Ren, your last trump card is gone. I think it's better to stop and let Yin Huan go. Zhang Xiaohua looked extremely troubled. She shook her head and said, Sai, I want to stop, but the jade talisman in my hand doesn't agree. After she finished speaking, she shook her hand and 2 jade talismans shot out. Vice Leader Su was shocked. He really didn't expect that Zhang Xiaohua would take out 3 jade talismans, which were regarded as treasures on the Lingxiang Peak of the Tenryu sect. And for what she said, she seemed to have more. This Tenryu sect was really too generous. Even the female disciples who hadn't finished their apprenticeship didn't have jade talismans. Only a few hall masters like him could be bestowed with jade talismans by the hierarch for self-defense. Not long after, the light shield had dimmed a lot. Perhaps one more jade talisman would be able to break the light shield. Vice Leader Su, who had never believed in ghosts and gods, couldn't help but chant Amitabha in his heart. He looked at Zhang Xiaohua's hand eagerly, hoping that she wouldn't take out another jade talisman. However, when Zhang Xiaohua took out her hand from her chest, there were actually 2 jade talismans in her hand. Vice Hall Master Su was about to go crazy. You can't bully us like this. When Zhang Xiaohua hit the light shield with the 2 jade talismans, Vice Leader Su took the initiative to stab her with his dagger. Unfortunately, when Zhang Xiaohua pointed her finger, the dragon binding ring tightened and pulled Vice Leader Su to the side. Vice Leader Su couldn't even get half a step closer to Zhang Xiaohua. Just when Vice Leader Su was about to make a move, he heard a crisp sound. The light shield dimmed completely, and the light shield burst like a bubble. The dragon binding ring immediately wrapped around Vice Leader Su's body. Vice Leader Su gritted his teeth and channeled his internal energy. The glow of the dagger in his hand increased by 3 inches. He straightened his body and stabbed towards Zhang Xiaohua. Zhang Xiaohua wasn't afraid of him. She pointed her finger, and the dragon binding ring flew in the air and firmly fixed Vice Leader Su in place. It was like Bai Huan being hung on a torture rack. Vice Hall Master Su was still in midair, but he was still unwilling to give up. He waved his left forearm, and the short sword in his hand flew towards Zhang Xiaohua's face. At the same time, he waved his right hand, and a black ray of light shot towards Zhang Xiaohua. The short sword was accurate, and it was aimed at Zhang Xiaohua's face. However, the poison arrow was slightly off target. Zhang Xiaohua reached out his hand and grabbed the short sword. Then, he moved his body and dodged far away. The black ray of light missed, and the poison needle did not explode where Zhang Xiaohua was standing. Zhang Xiaohua looked at the dagger in her hand and said with a smile, Vice Leader Su is too polite. Before she could finish her sentence, she heard a scream behind her. When she turned around, she saw that Chong Li, who was hiding nearby, was killed by Vice Leader Su's poisonous arrow. His face was full of poisonous needles, and it was obvious that he would die soon. Ouch! Zhang Xiaohua immediately understood. Although the short sword was meant to stab him, more importantly, it was meant to attract his attention. The poison arrow was even more calculated. It knew that he wouldn't touch it, so it was naturally meant for him to dodge it. Of course, it was meant to be shot at the stronger side. Alas, poor Chong. He had just been attracted by the mysterious martial arts that he had never seen or dreamed of. His entire body and mind were focused on their exquisite moves, strange jade slips, and inexplicable jade bracelets. How could he have thought that Vice Hall Master Su would kill him to silence him? When he saw the poisonous arrow and the poisonous needle in front of him, he realized that he couldn't dodge it with his martial arts. He only had time to let out a blood-curdling scream before he breathed his last. Vice Leader Su, you calculated well, Zhang Xiaohua said with a smile. I didn't intend to let him live. I'll let Vice Leader Su do it for me. Thank you, thank you. She pointed her finger and the dragon binding bracelet moved down a bit and wrapped around Vice Leader Su's arm. He couldn't move at all. Oomph. Vice Leader Su couldn't move his limbs at all. He snorted and said, if I don't kill him now, do you think I'll keep him alive for the Tenryu sect to interrogate? Zhang Xiaohua shook her head. I've told you countless times that I'm not from the Tenryu sect. Why are you so stubborn? Why do you insist that I'm from the Tenryu sect? Vice Leader Su snorted again and didn't say anything else. It was as if saying more would be an insult to his intelligence. Looking at Vice Leader Su, who was hanging in the air, Zhang Xiaohua touched his nose and thought about how to deal with him. He wanted to kill Vice Leader Su on the spot and make it obvious that he was someone with high martial arts. At this time, he didn't show his martial arts, so no one would suspect him. However, he thought about how he saved people in the Orchid Evening Refining. Who wouldn't know that he was a high martial arts master? Maybe in the future, if he showed his martial arts a little, people would suspect him. Although Vice Leader Su was sent by the incense cult, he knew that the incense cult didn't. After thinking about it, he couldn't come up with a good idea. Seeing Zhang Xiaohua's hesitation, Vice Leader Su chuckled. Why? Rin Xiaoxia? Do you feel that it's not a good idea to kill me? Hee hee. I am the Vice Leader of the Dan Expanding Hall. If your Tenryu sect doesn't want to be discovered by the incense cult, you better let me go obediently, and we can work together. Zhang Xiaohua couldn't be bothered to talk to him. She turned to look at Vice Leader Su's face that was already festering. She had an idea. Zhang Xiaohua pointed the dragon binding hoop at Vice Leader Su and dragged him to a chair. Vice Leader Su laughed. A wise man submits to circumstances. Junior Brother Rin, you have a clear view of the situation. However, Zhang Xiaohua did not release the dragon binding hoop. Instead, he pointed his finger at Vice Hall Master Su's face, and a piece of rotten flesh and a poisonous needle flew out and landed in the teacup on the table next to him. You? What are you doing? Zhang Xiaohua sneered, giving him a taste of his own medicine. Once he finished speaking, he walked forward and sealed Vice Hall Master Su's major acupoints. Chapter 698. When Vice Hall Master Su saw that Zhang Xiaohua had sealed his main acupuncture point, he opened his mouth. He wanted to say something, but no sound came out. It seemed that even if he could use the lotus blossom technique, Zhang Xiaohua would not let him go. Zhang Xiaohua opened Vice Hall Master Su's mouth and pointed with her finger. The cup of poisonous blood and pus flew out and poured into Vice Hall Master Su's mouth. Vice Hall Master Su struggled with all his might. He wanted to spit out the poisonous blood, but the moment the cold tea entered his stomach, he gave up on that thought. After being fed with the poisonous blood, Vice Hall Master Su's face turned dark red. Soon after, a mouthful of sweet blood flowed out from the corner of his mouth. It was a gorgeous sight under the light. Zhang Xiaohua smiled and pressed her finger on Vice Hall Master Su's body to unseal his acupuncture point. Vice Hall Master Su's face contorted from the heart-wrenching pain. You? Vice Hall Master Su only managed to utter a single word before his head tilted to the side. More blood flowed out from his 7 orifices. He had actually died from the poison that he had concocted. Zhang Xiaohua pointed again and sent the filthy liquid back to Meng Chang's body. She then released her divine sense and carefully examined Vice Hall Master Su's body. When she was certain that Vice Hall Master Su was dead, she let out a long sigh and said in a low voice, "Senior Bai, I have avenged you and vented my anger. I hope that you will be able to rest in peace when you are in the underworld." After she finished speaking, she kept the dragon binding ring and cleaned up the suspicious places in the hall. She then carried Meng Chang's and Meng Fei's corpses and left the hall. She put away the jade talismans that she had placed in the surroundings and disappeared to a secluded area at the edge of the cliff. Seeing that there was no one around and that there were rocks blocking his way, Zhang Xiaohua threw out 2 jade talismans, turning the 2 corpses into ashes. Without any hesitation, he immediately used the Imperial Wind technique and headed straight for Tianmu Peak. At this moment, in a place extremely far away from the White Yu Peak, there was another mountain peak that towered into the clouds. It towered over the earth in the dark night, and was actually more than twice the size of the White Yu Peak. There were also many pavilions and towers in the middle of the mountain, all of which were quietly bathed in the night sky. It was a slightly secluded courtyard, but it was brightly lit. In the hall, there was a small table with 4 exquisite dishes, a wine pot, and 2 wine cups. There were 2 people sitting opposite each other, drinking and chatting. A man in his 40s with a face as white as jade said warmly, "Zhao Jian, it's been a few days since you returned from the Yulon Grand Canyon. Have you recovered from your injuries?" Below him was a young disciple in his 20s. He was tall and strong, and his brocade robe made him look handsome and confident. However, his left hand was fastened with a cloth band, and his face was pale, indicating that he was still injured. Wasn't this the senior Zhao who led Zhang Xiaohu and the other disciples in the Yulon Grand Canyon? When Zhao Jian heard the man's question, he hurriedly replied respectfully, "Although this disciple was heavily injured, but with the Yuandan pill bestowed by Vice Hall Master Zhong, I have already recovered. This Yuandan pill is indeed worthy of being our fragrant religion's panacea. This disciple has come to thank Vice Hall Master Zhong for saving my life." When Vice Hall Master Zhong heard this, the smile on his face deepened. He waved his hand and said, "It's just a small matter. What's there to thank? Not to mention saving your life." Then he looked at the pitch-black night sky outside the hall and said, "It's been hard on you. You don't have any foundation in the fragrant religion, and you're not even a direct disciple in the Misty Hall. Yet, you were able to lead a group of senior sisters and junior brothers to the Yulon Grand Canyon. Alas, they didn't make it back, and you were able to escape with your life. This can be considered a great fortune in the misfortune of the Misty Hall." Hearing Vice Hall Master Zhong's words, Zhao Jian's face immediately became filled with shame and desolation. He said in a low voice, "Vice Hall Master Zhong, this disciple has let you down. You recommended me to lead the team, but..." As he spoke, his eyes were filled with tears. He said while crying, "But I really wanted to, but I was powerless. I watched as the blood wolves bit my junior brothers to death and ate them one by one. I couldn't even rush over. I really hate my martial arts for being so weak. I couldn't kill those hundreds of wolves one by one and save those pitiful junior brothers. Hall Master Zhong, I really am useless." When he finished speaking, his voice was already filled with tears, and he couldn't speak. "Alas, this can't be blamed on you. It's already a great fortune that you were able to escape with your life. I heard that there were 5 or 6 inner disciples who didn't make it out of the Yulon Grand Canyon. It's already very close to the closing time of the Yulon Grand Canyon. They must have met with misfortune. Even the inner disciples weren't a match for Huang Feng, not to mention you." Then he looked at the crying Zhao Jian and comforted him. "Although you didn't make any contributions in entering the valley this time, and you also lost almost 50 disciples, you still worked hard. Moreover, the ones who entered the valley this time were the elites of the younger generation. If they were to die in the valley, it would be a huge blow to our Misty Hall. At this time, we are in need of people. You are the leader of the younger generation in our spreading fragrance religion. If Hall Master Yang doesn't use you, who else can he use? Don't worry. Home Master Yang didn't punish you and let you recuperate in peace. Doesn't this mean that she still thinks highly of you? Zhao Jian stopped crying and said in a low voice, Home Master Zhong, disciple wasn't a direct disciple of the Misty School. It was only because of my talent in martial arts that I was able to make some achievements. And with your support, I was able to reach this step. Disciple is afraid that some people in the Misty Hall will come to slander Disciple because of the Yulon Grand Canyon. Hearing this, Vice Hall Master Zhong smiled proudly and said, You don't have to be afraid of this. Since the Yulon Grand Canyon values your ability and wants to train you, then even if all the disciples of the Misty Hall oppose, they can only watch and not say a word. Moreover, as you can see, although Home Master Yang took care of some of the original disciples of the Misty School, didn't she also treat you differently? After all, you grew up in the Misty Hall. Although your luck wasn't good and you weren't able to enter the ranks of the direct disciples, this is also a good opportunity. Didn't you see what the direct disciples of the Misty School are like? All of them have been crippled of their martial arts and have become disabled. Even walking is difficult for them. There's only one old third-generation disciple left. Oh, I heard that he came in through nepotism, so he's not a threat to you at all. And this third-generation disciple seems to have been buried in the belly of a wolf. Don't even mention him. Besides, out of the 50 people you brought with you, 40 of them didn't really support you. If they didn't come back, wouldn't it be even more difficult for you to? So, don't worry and do it boldly. I will support you from behind. The aroma cult will also be your solid backing. Hearing this, Zhao Jian's face was filled with joy. He picked up the wine cup on the table and respectfully said, Many thanks for Home Master Zhong's guidance. This disciple has been enlightened and will definitely follow your lead in the future. I won't hesitate to sacrifice my life for you. Hearing this, Vice Hall Master Zhong also smiled. He picked up the wine cup and was about to drink it when he suddenly thought of something and said, Zhao Jian, this first cup is to our brothers in the underworld. Let them rest in peace earlier. Zhao Jian slapped his forehead and said, Home Master Zhong really sympathizes with your subordinates. This disciple admires you. That's how it should be. Saying this, the two tilted the wine cup in their hands, and the fragrant wine spilled on the clean ground. In the pitch-black night sky, a slender shadow flew forward like the wind. As it flew, it anxiously looked at the night sky. It was Zhang Xiaohua who was rushing from Baiyue Peak to Tianmu Peak. Along the way, Zhang Xiaohua fiercely circulated his Zhen Qi. His previously healed meridians were torn again. In addition, he was kicked by Vice Hall Master Su, which injured his internal organs. This torment caused blood to flow out from the corner of his mouth. When he managed to rush back to Tianmu Peak, his meridians were already messed up. His face was deathly pale, and there was a lot of blood flowing out from the corner of his mouth. However, he couldn't care too much at this time. After identifying the direction, he immediately burrowed into the ground and rushed back to the small room where he was recuperating. Fortunately, when he returned to the small room and removed the restrictions around him, he didn't have time to sit down cross-legged. He felt a wave of dizziness, and his eyes immediately flickered. The next day, when Zhang Xiaohua woke up and checked his meridians, he couldn't help but grumble inwardly. After a night of cultivation, his meridians had recovered quite a bit. After thinking for a moment, Zhang Xiaohua secretly circulated his Zhen Qi and slightly destroyed his meridians in order to slow down the recovery of his injuries. After that, Zhang Xiaohua forced himself to get up. He stopped practicing the Fist of the North Star and called for Lu Chaoxian, who was guarding the door, to come in. Once Lu Chaoxian entered the room, he asked, Junior Brother Ren, your complexion was obviously rosy yesterday, which means that you have recovered. Why do you look worse today? Zhang Xiaohua laughed bitterly and said, Last night, I was too impatient and actually damaged my meridians again. I almost suffered from qi deviation. Lu Chaoxian said in shock. It's that serious? Then, Junior Brother Ren, you have to be careful. Illness comes like a landslide, but it goes away like silk. Oh, that's not right. Junior Brother is injured. Zhang Xiaohua laughed and said, Senior Brother Lu is right. It's the same logic. Yesterday, I was too impatient. In the future, I will take it slow. However, Senior Marshal Brother Lu, if you're watching me at the door, don't sleep too soundly. Last night, I felt uncomfortable and called out to you loudly, but you only responded by snoring. This. Lu Chaoxian scratched his head and smiled helplessly. Junior Brother Run, please excuse me. I faintly heard you calling out to me, but I remembered that you usually sleep like a log. I was afraid that I was dreaming, so... It's fine, it's fine. After all, nothing big happened last night. Zhang Xiaohua said with a smile. Just as they were talking, they heard a series of hurried footsteps outside the small courtyard. Then, they heard a rather familiar voice. Little brother, what are you talking about? I heard that your injuries are getting better. Chapter 699. Wasn't this familiar voice Chun Feng Xiao, Headmaster Chen? Zhang Xiaohua was taken aback as he thought to himself. It can't be. How did the news spread so quickly? Could it be that the news of Vice Hall Leader Su's death has already reached Tianmu Peak? Headmaster Chen wouldn't come to investigate, would he? Cough, cough. It had to be said, guilty conscience. The ancient saying was true. Do you think I'm afraid of him? Zhang Xiaohua encouraged himself in his heart. Then he forced himself to stand up. He gasped for breath and said, Master Chen is here. I'm not feeling well, so I can't welcome you. Please forgive me. Chun Fengxiao entered and said with a smile, Little brother, when did you become so polite? You've been back in a mountain capital for 2 days, but as your senior brother, I haven't come to see you. I should be the one apologizing. Then Wu Zhouxiu, who was behind Chun Fengxiao, also smiled and said, Headmaster Chen was thinking about coming to see you last night, but I happened to have some matters on hand, and it was late, so I was delayed. Today, the two of us came to see you together, little brother. Don't blame us for being late. Zhang Xiaohua was speechless. Luckily you guys didn't come yesterday, otherwise wouldn't I have been exposed? Thus, she put on a smile and said, Well said, well said. It's already good that the 2 headmasters came. How could I dare to think too much? Then, the disciples behind the 2 also came over to exchange greetings. Great Titan Zhou, Shuming, was also among them. Then, Chun Fengxiao looked at Zhang Xiaohua's pale face and asked with some surprise, Little brother, I heard yesterday that your injuries have improved, and you can even walk around the courtyard. I thought you would recover today, but now, your complexion seems to be the same as when you came back the day before yesterday. Even Wu Zhouxiu scolded. Little brother, is it that you don't have enough elixirs? If you don't, just tell me. The pill department doesn't have anything else, but there's still many elixirs. Then, with a look, he said, There are also many elixirs in high demand. Zhang Xiaohua thought to herself, If you want to give it to me, why don't you take it out now? It's obvious that you're not sincere. However, he still nodded and said, When we returned from White Mountain Peak, Lord Hall Master gave us some pills. It's enough. Then, he hesitated for a moment and said, It's just that when I was regulating my breathing last night, I was a little impatient and almost went crazy. Fortunately, I discovered it in time, so it didn't lead to a disaster. However, all my previous efforts have been wasted, and my injuries have worsened. I'll need more time to recuperate. Then, with a troubled look, he said, I won't be able to take care of the medicine fields on Tianmu Peak for the time being. I'll have a trouble senior by to do a little more. Hearing this, Chun Fengxiao's face was a little embarrassed, and he inadvertently glanced at Wu Zhouxiu. Actually, if it was someone else, Chun Fengxiao wouldn't be in such a difficult position and would be able to settle it with a single sentence. However, Zhang Xiaohua's martial arts were good, and he had saved 8 people in the Orchid Dusk refinement. His reputation on Tianmu Peak was immediately praised to the sky by the disciples. Whoever mentioned the dead, Zhang Xiaohua, wouldn't they say the words benevolence and righteousness? Now that he had returned safely, he was a huge threat to Chun Fengxiao's position. Furthermore, he was personally received by Elder Sage Ginseng of the Pill Expanding Hall, and was even bestowed with elixirs. Oh, right, Zhang Xiaohua had even saved an intersect female disciple in the Orchid Grand Canyon. All these were things that Chun Fengxiao couldn't even imagine. He could almost see that a path to the heavens had already been paved in front of Zhang Xiaohua. Hence, he couldn't have any more half-hearted thoughts. After thinking for a while, Chun Fengxiao said, "It's like this, little brother." Following that, Chun Fengxiao recounted the information that Lu Chaoxian had gathered and finally said, "Little brother's mount had indeed eaten the medicinal herbs. This is something that I have also seen. Although I have also mentioned little brother's participation in the orchid dusk refinement, but the rules are the rules, and no one can violate them. Hence, even if junior brother Bai Huan had nothing to do with this matter, but since little brother had entrusted the mount to him, he had no choice but to be brought back to the White Mountain Peak to accept that investigation." Zhang Xiaohua's face showed shock and muttered, "Io, there's such a matter? If head leader Chen didn't mention it, I really didn't know. This entrusting the mount to senior brother Bai, I didn't expect that it would bring him so much trouble. Sigh. When he returns, I still have to properly apologize." "Oh, that's right. Head leader Chun, why don't you let me go to the White Mountain Peak? Senior brother Bai is also innocent. Let him return as soon as possible. I'll go find the hall leader to admit my guilt." Wu Zhoushu smiled and said, "There's no need. Little brother is chivalrous. Even the hall leader knows about it. There's no need to admit such a small mistake. I'm sure junior brother Bai Huan will return in a few days." The corner of Zhang Xiaohua's eyes twitched a few times, and she suppressed her emotions and said, "That's good. That's good." Chun Fengxiao was still not at ease and said, "But little brother's mount." Zhang Xiaohua waved her hand. "It's just a mount. If it ran away, then it ran away. Anyway, it's still in our incense cult. Maybe we'll see it again in the future." In fact, when Lu Chaoxian told her about it yesterday, Zhang Xiaohua already had a plan. Although Huan Huan was just a beast, it was still somewhat intelligent, and it might not be able to run far. It might even be in the vicinity of Tianmu Peak. As long as she returned and had the time to search, she should be able to find it. So why should she make things difficult for Chen Fengxiao? Seeing that Zhang Xiaohua wasn't in a difficult position, Chen Fengxiao heaved a sigh of relief and said with a smile, "Little brother is so open-minded. You really have the magnanimity of a big shot. As your senior brother, I really admire you. However, our Tianmu Peak also has many fine horses. If little brother takes a fancy to any of them, just let me know." The few of them chatted for a while, and when they saw Zhang Xiaohua's tired face, Wu Zhoushu smiled and said, "Little brother's injuries have healed, so we won't disturb you any further. The method of internal energy recovery has to be done step by step, like last night. Don't try again in the future." Zhang Xiaohua nodded slightly in thanks. Chen Fengxiao also bid farewell. "All right, we'll be leaving now. When little brother's injuries are healed, we'll celebrate with you and drink until we're drunk." Seeing that everyone had left, Zhang Xiaohua heaved a sigh of relief and thought to herself, "So they weren't testing me. I thought last night's matter was already exposed." Sweat, Zhang Xiaohua didn't think that he was just an ordinary disciple. Even if he managed to escape from the orchid dusk, it wasn't enough for him to be valued by the lingering fragrance peak. So why would they suspect him? Furthermore, looking at the time, it was just daybreak. Chun Fengxiao and the rest might have arrived early, but Vice Hall Master Su's work and rest might not be so early. Perhaps no one was able to appreciate Zhang Xiaohua's extravagance on Baiyue Peak. Because Zhang Xiaohua wanted to delay his injuries, he didn't plan to cultivate the Carefree Heart Sutra. So he sat cross-legged and closed his eyes to comprehend the talismans in his Naiwan Palace. After the orchid dusk refinement, another talisman of the three-legged golden crow had revealed its true appearance, but Zhang Xiaohua didn't have the time to carefully examine it. Now that he had the time, it was time to properly comprehend the three talismans. There were many restrictions and formations in the lingering fragrance cult. Zhang Xiaohua had only been to a few places, but he had already encountered many. Presumably, he would encounter more in the future, so he had to work harder. Not to mention that Zhang Xiaohua was staying at Tianmu Peak to recuperate. Baiyue Peak, which was late in the morning, wasn't as chaotic as Zhang Xiaohua had imagined. It was obvious that the disciple who had been waiting outside Vice Hall Master Su's courtyard had been anxious for a long time, But he hadn't seen Vice Hall Master Sue's figure after waiting for a long time. When he mustered up the courage to find the small courtyard and saw Vice Hall Master Sue's dead body, how could he bear it? He rushed to find Elder Purple Herb. This was a person who was second only to one person in the Pill Repository Hall, so he didn't dare to delay at all. When Elder Purple Herb heard this bad news, his first reaction was, "Is there going to be a ghost?" In the past, he wouldn't encounter such strange things for decades, or even centuries. How could he encounter all of them this year? Although he was the Hall Master of the Pill Repository Hall, he was an inner disciple like Vice Hall Master Sue. He only instructed the disciple who reported the news not to leak it at will and kept it a secret. Then, he immediately sent his confidant to Lingering Fragrance Peak to report the news. After that, he personally went to the secluded small courtyard to investigate. In short, the Lingering Fragrance cult had been passed down for tens of thousands of years and had encountered all kinds of strange situations. Why would they panic because of the death of a small Vice Hall Master? Especially when he was poisoned to death. Even the disciples of the Pill Repository Hall on Baiwa Peak didn't know that their most respected and beloved Vice Hall Master, Sue, had long left them, and they could no longer see his amiable face. On Shirshin Peak, which was very far away from Timu Peak and Baiwa Peak, there was a rather large square halfway up the mountain. Above it was a hall several times larger than the Pill Repository Hall and Hunter Herb Hall. There was a horizontal board with the words Misty Hall written on it. At this time, in the Misty Hall, there were only a few people sitting in such a large place. Directly above was Hall Master Yang Rupiang, the widow of sect leader O Peng of the Misty School. Below her left was a middle-aged man with a face as white as jade. Below her right was a middle-aged woman with a rather dark face. Even the lines on her body were too horrible to look at. Looking down, there was a tall and mighty male disciple standing respectfully in front of the hall. Yang Rupiang slightly frowned and asked, "Zhao Jian, your injuries have not healed yet. Stay and rest for the time being. There are not many things to do in the hall, so you don't have to come so early." The male disciple in front of the hall had his left hand fixed in front of his chest and a smile on his face. Hall Master Yang is wise. Although this disciple has not healed yet, I am worried that there are not enough people in the hall. The others are all greenhorns. Don't delay the Hall Master's important matters. A very pleasant voice sounded. If you have such loyalty, what have you been doing? Misty School. Hall has more than 50 disciples. You took them away alive, but only you came back. This loyalty? My Ming Tsue Hall has nearly 20 female disciples, but none of them came back. You're tuning in to the Romance Rendezvous YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.